Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Only then did Akame close the distance between them. She moved to sit beside Kiram and gently took her sister's left hand in hers. Meanwhile, on the other side, Blaine was casually chatting with the rest of Night Trade. There wasn't much to talk about, but with Leon and Bula's lively personalities, the atmosphere never felt awkward. Mine, on the other hand, remained as unfriendly toward him as ever. Chelsea, however, was the complete opposite. She was the one who treated Blaine the most warmly. Standing right beside him, Chelsea asked, "Did you try the lollipop I gave you last time? It tasted good." Blaine nodded. Mine, watching Chelsea's actions, couldn't help but feel puzzled. She had no idea why Chelsea was being so friendly with Blaine, especially when she found him so irritating. Just then, Najunda returned with some documents. She handed them to Blaine. "This contains a list of officials from the Conscience faction." Blaine took the papers and quickly scanned them. The number of officials in the faction was surprisingly small, and many of them were already dead, eliminated by Minister Honest's orders. As he flipped through the list, he came across a particularly significant name: the former Prime Minister, Tree. During Tree's tenure, the Empire had been strong and prosperous, a time of stability compared to the chaos of today. After Honest took over, Tree withdrew from public life. If not for the protection of Great General Do, he would have long since been purged by Honest. Suddenly, Akame and Kurum returned. They were holding hands, looking unusually close. "Akame, you too." Najunda was visibly surprised. Akame got straight to the point. "For the next assassination mission, I want to carry it out with Kurum." Chapter 90, Zanku the Beheader and the Prime Minister's relatives. Blaine's attention shifted from the Conscience faction list to Akame and Kurum. He couldn't help but be surprised. Had their relationship suddenly improved? Given Kurum's previous attitude toward Akame, he had assumed there was little hope for reconciliation anytime soon. The others seemed just as taken aback. Now, Akame and Kurum looked like nothing less than a pair of close sisters. "There's no problem with you two working together, but I'm curious, how did your relationship suddenly get better?" Najunda asked. "I made a promise with Kurum. After we kill Prime Minister Honest, she will be the one to kill me," Akame explained. "That's why she is willing to cooperate with us now." "I see." Najunda nodded slightly. As for Akame offering to die at Kurum's hands, Najunda didn't comment. She respected Akame's decision. They had previously agreed to let Akame handle matters between herself and Kurum, and now it was time to honor that promise. "Then, Akame, that means you'll..." Mine's face filled with sorrow. "I've already made up my mind," Akame said calmly. "All right." Mine didn't know what else to say. Understanding the situation, Blaine felt a sense of relief. While this was only a temporary reconciliation, it was still a crucial step forward. Kurum's brainwashing would gradually weaken over time, and by the time Prime Minister Honest was eliminated, there was a chance it would have faded almost entirely. "But there's something I need you all to handle next," Najunda said. "A serial killer has been terrorizing the Imperial capital, striking only at night. He randomly beheads innocent people on the streets. So far, there are at least 20 to 30 confirmed victims, but the actual number is likely much higher. Even Imperial guards have been targeted." She continued. "He's become so unhinged that he attacks indiscriminately. That must be Zanku the Beheader. I heard he's a Tegu user," Lubbock said. Najunda nodded. "That's him. Zanku the Beheader." Blaine hadn't been keeping up with the security issues in the Imperial capital lately, so he wasn't aware that a serial killer was running rampant. If this had happened while he was in office, he would have led the Imperial security forces to take him down long ago. "Look at you, completely clueless. Some official of the Imperial capital you are," Mine said, deliberately mocking Blaine. Sorry, I don't know about this either," Sheil admitted, raising her hand with a blank expression. No, Sheil, you just forgot." Mine sighed, exasperated. "Zanku the Beheader was originally the executioner at the Empire's largest prison," Najunda explained. "Under Prime Minister Honest's tyranny, countless innocents were beheaded. After carrying out so many executions day and night, Zanku became addicted to the act itself. She laid out the full details of Zanku the Beheader's past for Blaine. Zanku also stole the Tigu that originally belonged to the prison warden. With such powerful weaponry in his hands, he became even more reckless, slaughtering people without restraint. Bullet added. When he escaped with the Tigu, the prison warden immediately formed a squad to hunt him down. But I never expected him to be bold enough to start killing people openly in the streets of the imperial capital. Looks like executing prisoners in the prison wasn't enough for him anymore. This guy is a perfect match for Akame and Kirim to handle. That shouldn't be a problem, right? As Najunda spoke, she turned to Blaine. Now that Kirim is part of your group, I should check with you first. At that moment, Akame and Kirim both looked at Blaine expectantly, clearly hoping for his approval. I have no objections. You two just focus on working together, Blaine said. He was actually glad to see their relationship improving. If things continued this way, they wouldn't have to fight to the death. Good. Zanku the Beheader should still be lurking in the streets tonight. Because of him, the civilians are too afraid to go out after dark. If Akame and Kirim patrol the streets, he'll likely see them as targets. Najunda continued, at that point, you'll take him down. With my sister and me working together, failure is impossible. Kirim said confidently. But we can't be careless. He's a Tigu user as well. Akame warned, remaining cautious. Najunda had complete confidence in them. One was the ace of the Revolutionary Army, the other the ace of the Empire's assassination unit. Sending both of them after Zanku almost felt like overkill, but better safe than sorry. If they lost a comrade due to underestimating the enemy, it would be too late for regrets. Besides that, we have another assassination target: Prime Minister Honest's distant relative, Ecchi. Najunda continued, using Honest's influence, he kidnaps women at will, tortures them to death, and has remained untouchable this whole time. This mission is critical. While Akame and Kirim deal with Zanku the Beheader, the rest of us will focus on eliminating Ecchi. Oh, and don't forget the mercenaries guarding Ecchi are just as guilty. They're all assassination targets as well. These aren't just any hired thugs either, they're elite fighters from the Imperial Fist Temple. Don't underestimate them. With that, Najunda laid out the next objective. Then, she turned to Blaine. The only question now is, are you willing to join us on this mission? If Blaine agreed to help, their chances of success would increase significantly. No problem. Blaine nodded. At the very least, when it comes to purging the Empire's filth, we're on the same side. Great. Then let's go over the battle plan. Mine will be our primary attacker for assassinating Ecchi. She can take him out from a distance with her Tigu, but she'll need protection. Her close combat skills are lacking. Najunda explained, apart from mine and whoever protects her, the rest of us will deal with Ecchi's mercenaries. This is the safest approach. No one objected to the plan. That just leaves choosing who will guard mine. How about Blaine? Najunda suggested. She knew that mine and Blaine didn't get along, so this could be a good opportunity to improve their relationship. Since they might have to work together long term, it would be a problem if tensions remained high. Chapter 91, Airfield. Just so we're clear, I'm only following the boss's orders. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to be in a team with you. Mine looked reluctant. Yeah. Blaine replied casually. Hearing his obviously perfunctory tone, mine immediately huffed. Blaine is stronger than you. If you keep acting like this, aren't you afraid he'll find a chance to get back at you later? Maybe grab you and bully you real hard. As she spoke, Chelsea mimicked a grabbing motion with both hands, her expression as sleazy as an old pervert. What? Mine's face turned bright red as she hurriedly crossed her arms over her chest. She shot Blaine a furious glare. Pervert. Blaine, looking helpless, waved his hands in denial. No. I'd never do something like that. And Chelsea was the one who said it. Why am I the one getting blamed? True, not everyone's into airfields. Chelsea covered her mouth, chuckling. What she meant by airfield was obvious. Mine instantly felt insulted. Who are you calling an airfield? If little Mine wants to take it personally, there's nothing I can do about it. Chelsea spread her hands innocently. You. Mine was so mad her twin tails practically stood on end. But there was nothing she could do. She couldn't outtalk Chelsea, and she definitely couldn't beat her up. Attacking a teammate wasn't an option. So all she could do was fume. Blaine remained silent, deciding not to get involved in Mine and Chelsea's antics. Still, despite her anger, Chelsea's words had reminded Mine of something important. Strictly speaking, Blaine wasn't really part of Night Trade. His ideals weren't fully aligned with theirs, they were just temporarily working together. Her teammates might tolerate her temper, but an outsider wouldn't. Maybe she really needed to watch herself. Seeing how close Mine and Chelsea are, I feel relieved. Najunda said with a smile. Huh? Where do you see us being close? Mine protested immediately. After some light-hearted banter, Blaine, Kurum, and the rest of Night Raid got ready to move out. They split into two teams. Akame and Kurum were tasked with taking down Zanku the Beheader, while Blaine and the rest of Night Raid targeted Ecchi, a relative of the Prime Minister. Blaine and the others were making faster progress than Akame and Kurum since the two sisters wouldn't have a chance to confront Zanku the Beheader until late at night. By now, they had already arrived near Ecchi's estate, an enormous, extravagant mansion. Located outside the imperial capital, the estate's secluded position made it an ideal target for an assassination. However, Ecchi's personal guards were no pushovers, they were all elite fighters from the Imperial Fist Temple. Without such protection, he wouldn't have dared to build a mansion in such a place. The estate itself was heavily guarded, making infiltration nearly impossible. Blaine and Mine had already positioned themselves at a high vantage point, a hill not far from the estate, perfect for a sniper shot. From here, they had a clear view of most of the grounds. This is the best spot for a sniper kill. Once that bastard comes out, I'll take him down in one shot. Mine had already set up her pumpkin cannon, eyes locked on the mansion. He's out. Blaine suddenly said. Huh? Where? I don't see him. Mine asked, confused. He just stepped out of his room. The angle is too obscure, he hasn't reached the front gate yet. Wait until he gets there before you shoot, that'll be the safest option. Blaine said calmly. Mine was the designated sniper, yet Blaine seemed to have an even sharper eye than she did. TCH, I don't need you telling me what to do. She felt a sudden wave of irritation, as if her expertise was being challenged. He's coming. Blaine reminded her, ignoring her attitude. Ecchi was approaching the gate, surrounded by a group of maids dressed in elegant cheongsams. Two of them clung to his arms, making it significantly harder to take the shot without harming innocent bystanders. Still, Blaine figured that since Najenda had entrusted the job to Mine, she must be more than capable. There was no need for him to say anything more. I know. In an instant, Mine's entire demeanor shifted, her focus sharpened, and her eyes burned with deadly intent. Watch closely this magnificent shot. The moment her words fell, the pumpkin cannon fired. A blast of energy streaked through the air in a perfect, unwavering line, piercing straight through Ecchi's forehead with pinpoint accuracy. By the time he registered the flash of light before his eyes, he was already dead. His skull was completely obliterated, and as his lifeless body fell backward, the surrounding maids were still clueless about what had happened. The two women he had been holding remained unscathed. A flawless assassination. What do you think? I am a genius sniper, after all. Mine boasted, her confidence unwavering. She didn't even bother to check her handiwork, she knew her shot was perfect. That was impressive. A perfect hit. Blaine praised without hesitation. Mine blinked in surprise. She had made it abundantly clear that she disliked him. Most people would feel at least a little offended by that, yet Blaine didn't seem to mind at all. Instead, he just outright complimented her without any hesitation or sarcasm. Thanks. She felt a little flustered. But almost immediately, she added, don't get the wrong idea. I'm just being polite, it's not like I'm happy about it or anything. Blaine tilted his head slightly. He had no idea what she was trying to say, but he didn't dwell on it. Now, their priority was to leave the area before reinforcements arrived. Shiel's group would handle the Imperial Fist Temple elites. At that moment, several masked guards rushed out of the mansion. We have to capture the assassin at all costs. If we fail, Prime Minister Honest will have our heads. The assassin can't have gotten far, stay sharp. The Imperial Fist Temple guards charged in Blaine and Mine's direction, but before they could get far, Shiel and the others intercepted them. Here they come, Leon cracked her knuckles, the sharp popping sounds echoing through the air as she grinned eagerly. She was more than ready for a fight. But then, they noticed something strange. There were supposed to be 5 guards. Only 4 had shown up. Where was the last one? Chapter 92, Shut Up. Blaine and Mine were making their way to the designated rendezvous point, sticking to a safe route as they navigated through rough terrain. This is such a pain. This route is way too troublesome. Mine grumbled. Blaine remained silent, steadily moving through the overgrown landscape without a word. The tediousness of the route only made Mine more restless. Unable to bear the silence, she started chatting. We should be the first ones to reach the rendezvous point. Those guards trained at the Imperial Fist Temple, so even Shiel and the others won't have an easy time dealing with them. Noticing her eagerness to talk, Blaine figured it would be impolite to ignore her completely, so he gave a simple response. Yeah, I've encountered Imperial Fist Temple masters before. None of them are weak. Ecchi is a relative of the Prime Minister, so of course his guards wouldn't be pushovers. I can't stand guys like him, those who abuse their power and act like they own the world. The moment Blaine responded, Mine immediately launched into another rant. Before long, they spotted a large tree standing alone in the grassy field ahead, the rendezvous point they had agreed on earlier. Once Shield and the others finished dealing with the guards and regrouped here, the mission would be officially complete. Finally, we're almost there. Mine sighed in relief. Compared to the rest of Night Raid, her physical endurance wasn't as strong, which made traveling through rough terrain all the more exhausting for her. But just then, Blaine suddenly sensed the faintest movement behind them, almost imperceptible, but enough to put him on alert. His sharp instincts immediately told him they were being followed. He spun around, and sure enough, a figure had appeared just a few meters behind Mine, a man with braided hair and shoulder armor. His ability to conceal his presence was impressive. Blaine had only detected him because he was moments away from launching an attack. Assassins in this world were exceptionally skilled at masking their presence, and even the Mangekyo Sharingan wasn't all powerful. It couldn't instantly sense a completely undetectable stalker. Mine, we've got company. Blaine warned immediately. Mine reacted swiftly. Her expression darkened as she swung her pumpkin cannon around and fired a shot backward. But their pursuer was quick. He dodged the energy blast with ease. This guy. When did he get here? Mine's expression turned grim as she realized she had missed her shot. I'm the strongest among the hired guards. I noticed long ago that you split into two groups. The man sneered. He then turned his gaze to Blaine. You're not bad, kid. Not many people can detect me that fast. Blaine remained silent, his face expressionless. He had no interest in exchanging pointless words. At the same time, he had already transferred Mine's missed energy shot into the Kamui space, though neither she nor the man noticed. I'll capture you both alive and hand you over to the Prime Minister as my ticket to glory. If you cooperate, I might just go easy on you. The man spoke with full confidence, acting as if victory was already his. His reasoning made sense since the assassins had split up. It was logical to assume the stronger group had stayed behind to intercept the guards, while the first to retreat would be the weaker ones. Unfortunately for him, he had run into Blaine. If you're from the Imperial Fist Temple, then you must specialize in hand-to-hand combat. Blaine suddenly spoke. Huh? Are you actually suggesting a fight in close combat? Do you have any idea how insulting that is to us? The man was momentarily surprised but then smirked arrogantly. The Imperial Fist Temple wasn't just the strongest in the Empire. When it came to martial arts, they claimed to be the strongest in the world. While he wasn't at the level of the 4 Rakshasa demons, he was still a first-rate fighter, confident enough to face some Tengu users barehanded. Against someone like Mine, who lacked close combat abilities, he had a clear advantage. Don't be stupid. You have a Tengu, don't you? Just use it and finish him off. Mine, completely misunderstanding Blaine's intentions, thought he was about to fight the man unarmed. She was referring to the gun by Akaiwa. Having seen its power before, she figured it was the perfect weapon against an opponent skilled in melee combat. Blaine ignored her and instead looked at the man. Tell me, can you dodge this? Before his words had fully left his mouth, an invisible spatial gate opened right in front of the enemy. In an instant, the energy wave that Blaine had previously stored in the Kamui space shot out. The Kamui space was nearly limitless, and Blaine had complete control over it. Anything stored inside could be retrieved and used at will. What? The man barely had time to register the slight distortion in space before a blast of energy materialized out of nowhere, aimed directly at his forehead. Before he could react, the shot pierced through his skull, killing him instantly. Ding. The host has eliminated an Imperial Fist Temple Master and received 15 system points. Even though the energy blast had been fired from Mine's pumpkin cannon, the system still credited the kill to Blaine. It was even smarter than he had expected. Mine stood there in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. That was my energy shot just now? How the hell did you do that? She turned to Blaine, utterly baffled. The shot had unmistakably come from her pumpkin cannon. But since she was the only one capable of using it, she couldn't wrap her head around how Blaine had managed to fire it again. It's a secret. Blaine had no intention of revealing anything about the Kamui space. A secret, huh? Mine huffed, clearly displeased. She turned away, folding her arms. Humphrey. Fine. Not like I really wanted to know anyway. A short while later, Blaine and Mine arrived at the rendezvous point under the large tree. Shield and the others hadn't arrived yet, giving them a brief moment to rest. But thanks for earlier. Despite still feeling a little annoyed about the secrecy, Mine was at least reasonable enough to show gratitude. Without Blaine's intervention, dealing with that enemy would have been a lot harder. If she had been captured alive. She didn't even want to think about what would have happened. Her voice grew softer and softer until her final words were barely audible. What was that? Were you saying thank you? Blaine genuinely hadn't heard her, so he asked. Ugh, shut up. Chapter 93, Unexplainable Inner Irritation. As Blaine and Mine rested, Mine suddenly spoke up. I wasn't exactly nice to you before. Maybe it's because of your beliefs. Or maybe I was just being selfish. Blaine glanced at her, slightly curious. How so? My hometown is on the western border of the empire. I'm a mixed-race child with Western region ancestry, so I was constantly discriminated against. Everyone treated me like an outsider. My childhood was miserable. Sitting under the tree, Mine stared into the distance, recalling her past. It wasn't until the Revolutionary Army allied with the Western region that I joined them. They told me that once the empire was overthrown and a new nation was established, the country and the different ethnic groups would form diplomatic ties. If all the peoples united, there would no longer be children who suffered like I did. Her tone suddenly grew firm. I never want anyone else to go through that kind of discrimination. Even if it means going against your beliefs, I have to do this. So, maybe that makes me selfish. It was clear how deeply she believed in this. After a brief silence, Blaine finally spoke. I understand. But you might be looking at it too simply. A new nation doesn't automatically mean diplomatic relations with other groups. In fact, conflicts could worsen. Ethnic integration isn't something that just happens overnight. Mine had been expecting an argument, yet Blaine remained calm and reasonable. That caught her off guard. Then tell me, what do you think is the right way to make it happen? She asked immediately. To be honest, even she had felt the Revolutionary Army made it sound too easy. But she hadn't known of any other path, so overthrowing the empire had always seemed like the only solution. Besides, she didn't mind working as an assassin in night trade. Eliminating corrupt officials was a worthy cause. Blaine responded, for real integration to happen, you'd need an emperor and foreign leaders willing to reform, a stable and peaceful environment to encourage cooperation, cultural exchanges that lead to shared traditions. And, most importantly, time. The reality is, the biggest obstacle right now isn't the existence of the empire itself, it's Honest's regime. What matters is how the country's leadership enacts policies. If the new rulers still discriminate against other ethnic groups, nothing will change. Integrating different peoples wasn't that simple. In his past life, even China had undergone thousands of years of cultural blending, conflicts, and wars before reaching a certain level of unity. The empire wasn't anywhere close to that level of civilization. Blaine wasn't against regime change, but he didn't want foreign nations exploiting the chaos. Besides, after Honest's downfall, the situation wouldn't be much different from an outright change in government. The so-called new nation in the original story? It had still been run by former empire officials. What truly made Blaine wary was the Revolutionary Army's leadership. Did they have their own hidden agenda? He couldn't say for sure, but he had a strong feeling that Mine had been misled. And even if the leaders did have personal ambitions, that was just human nature. Of course. Blaine added, I do have my own biases about foreigners. You and I both have our flaws, so let's just call it even. Mine was surprised for a moment, then suddenly let out a small laugh. I never thought I'd hear something like that from you. But you're right. Integrating different ethnic groups isn't as easy as I thought. After Honest's regime falls, I'll figure out what comes next. She found herself warming up to Blaine a little. Maybe he wasn't as annoying as she had thought. Still, taking down Honest remained her top priority. As for what came after, she'd deal with that when the time came. Anyway, no matter what, I'll make sure I'm remembered as the hero who overthrew Honest. That way, I can become a noble and live a life of endless luxury. In an instant, her serious expression disappeared, replaced by a dreamy, almost silly smile as she envisioned her glamorous future. Beyond her wish to protect future mixed-race children from discrimination, she also had a very real, very personal goal: becoming rich and enjoying the good life. Ahaha. Blaine let out a slightly awkward chuckle. Well, at least it was a practical dream. By now, the 4 intercepted guards had all been eliminated. Some were sliced in half by Shield, some were beaten to death by Leon, some were taken out from behind in a swift kill by Chelsea, and some were completely overpowered by Bullet, whose hand-to-hand combat skills were approaching Esdeath's level. Lubbock was the only one who hadn't landed a single kill. These guys were way too weak. That wasn't even satisfying. Leon grumbled, rolling her shoulders as if the fight hadn't even been enough to warm her up. She was still in her transformed state after activating her Tegu, the King of Beasts transformation, Lionel, which took the form of a belt wrapped around her waist. After beastification, she had grown animal ears, and her hands had turned into sharp claws. Other than that, she hadn't changed much physically. More importantly, her strength had skyrocketed, along with an enhanced sense of smell. You guys finished them off too fast. I didn't even get a single kill. And there were only 4 of them. What a letdown. Lubbock complained, clearly disappointed. You barely did anything? Then your share of the reward is getting cut in half. Leon said casually. Wait, no. I was working hard to support you guys. Lubbock panicked at the thought of losing half his reward. She'll hesitantly raised a hand. Weren't there supposed to be 5 guards? Where's the last one? They might have slipped past us to track mine and Blaine. Bullet said, his tone serious. An enemy with that level of awareness might be a problem. They went after mine? Blaine's with her, so they should be fine. Leone said, though she had never actually seen Blaine's full capabilities. She just had a gut feeling that he was reliable. Blaine's strong, no doubt about that. But we should still go check on them, just in case. She ladded. Having witnessed Blaine use the gun by Akiwa to hunt danger beasts, she was the most qualified to vouch for him. Without wasting any time, the group rushed to the rendezvous point. When they arrived, they saw Blaine and mine sitting under a large tree, chatting and laughing without a care in the world. Neither of them looked injured. Everyone immediately relaxed. Huh? When did those two start getting along so well? Leone asked in surprise. Mine had always looked irritated whenever Blaine was around, but now she was smiling at him. This is a good thing. Wasn't the boss hoping they'd get along? Lubbock pointed out. That's great. Chell said, genuinely happy about it. Looks like something happened while we weren't around. Chelsea mused. On the surface, she was smiling, but deep down, a strange sense of irritation bubbled up. Chelsea wasn't clueless like Sarah, quite the opposite. She understood things very well. And right now, she had a bad feeling. Crap. Don't tell me I. Chapter 94, Omnipotent 5 Sites Imperial Capital. Late at night, Akame and Kirum walked side by side through the empty streets. Both had slipped into the city undetected. Akame, being a notorious wanted criminal, couldn't afford to be seen, and Kirum knew that Skyulu's people would be watching her closely. Neither of them wore disguises or bothered to conceal their faces, simply moving through the dimly lit streets as they were. Not a single soul was in sight. The recent string of serial murders had left the city gripped with fear. No one dared step outside after dark. Wanted posters covered the walls, and among them, Akame's was the most prominent. The likeness was eerily accurate, nearly identical to her real appearance. Shiel, Bullet, and Najenda were also on the wanted list, which meant they had to keep their faces hidden during missions. Bullet, however, had an advantage. The difference between his wanted poster and his current look was drastic. His once handsome hairstyle had been replaced by an eccentric pompadour. With such a drastic change, he could probably walk right past someone without being recognized. My sister's bounty is the highest. Well, she is the trump card, after all. Kirum said with a small smile, glancing at the reward amount. Akame gave a faint smile in return. That's not exactly something to be happy about. The two had been searching the streets for quite some time but had yet to find any sign of Zanku the beheader. Unbeknownst to them, Zanku was already watching them from the highest point of a nearby clock tower. His Digu, Omnipotent 5 Sites, Spectator, granted him special abilities, allowing him to observe Akame and Kirum from afar without them even noticing his presence. A serial killer and an assassin? The Imperial capital really is the best. Delightful, delightful. A grin spread across Zanku's face as he chuckled to himself. He had already recognized Akame. The countless wanted posters plastered throughout the city had made that easy. So, whose head should I take first? He locked his gaze onto Akame and Kirum, carefully deciding which of them would be his first target. Akame and Kirum still hadn't found Zanku the beheader, but he had already begun to make his move. At this moment, the two sat on a bench, taking a short rest. As expected, finding Zanku the beheader isn't easy. We'll just have to keep searching. Akame said. It's only been one night. Back when we were in the Imperial Assassination Unit, didn't we often go to great lengths to eliminate our targets? Kirum recalled the past when her sister was still part of the unit. Back then, their days were filled with either assassinations or the journey to one. They had long since grown accustomed to this kind of life. Hearing this, Akame felt a bit nostalgic. You're right. If necessary, we can stay in the Imperial capital for a few more days until we find Zanku the beheader. Let's split up. It'll be more efficient that way. Kirum suggested. She was simply following the principles ingrained in her from her time in the assassination unit, prioritizing efficiency, even if it meant increasing the risk. All right, but don't go too far. Akame said with a hint of concern. Got it. Kirum nodded with a small smile. With that, they went their separate ways in search of Zanku the beheader. Unbeknownst to them, he was already nearby, using his Digu, Spectator. Even through buildings, he could see Akame and Kirum. He was waiting for the perfect opportunity, and the moment they split up was exactly what he had been looking for. Akame hadn't been apart from Kirum for long when she suddenly spotted her in a narrow alley. Kirum? You? Akame frowned in confusion. She was sure Kirum had gone in the opposite direction, so how had she gotten ahead so quickly? In reality, This Kirum was an illusion created by Zanku the Beheader. It was one of Spectator's abilities illusion sight which could make its target see hallucinations. The Kirum before her was nothing more than an illusion conjured by her own mind. Kirum slowly walked toward Akame, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Although something felt off, Akame remained unsuspecting. Just as Kirum reached her, the illusion suddenly vanished, revealing Zanku the Beheader, a tall man wearing a tigu shaped like a large eye on his head. At the same time, two sharp blades extended from his sleeves, slicing toward Akame in a sudden attack. Akame's expression shifted, and she quickly leapt back. Even so, her clothes were slashed, leaving a tear in the fabric. Luckily, her reflexes had saved her. Any slower, and she would have been hit. "Who are you?" Without hesitation, Akame drew her demon blade, more aim, and fixed a wary gaze on her opponent. She had initially thought the person in front of her had only disguised themselves as Kirum, so she hadn't immediately connected him to Zanku the Beheader. "You assume that because I could take on Kirum's appearance, I couldn't be Zanku the Beheader, right?" Zanku smirked coldly. "Unfortunately, you were wrong. I am none other than the kind and friendly Zanku the Beheader." Akame remained silent. He had read her thoughts. Was this the ability of his Tigu? But more importantly, this man was the very target they had been searching for. That's right. This is one of Spectator's abilities, insight. By reading subtle changes in facial expressions, I can see exactly what you're thinking. Oh, and just so you know, I've been watching you two this whole time using far sight and clear sight. Zanku didn't seem to be in any rush to kill Akame. Instead, he started chatting casually. "Since you guessed correctly, how about I turn you into a shrunken head as a reward?" He enjoyed conversations like this, talking to his victims as he toyed with them. "I really love far sight. No matter how dark or foggy it is, I can see everything crystal clear from a distance." As Zanku rambled on, Akame remained silent. She was focused on one thing, making sure Kirum was safe. And when the opportunity presented itself, she would strike. But once again, Zanku saw right through her. Naive. He effortlessly dodged Akame's attack and laughed. "I can see every thought running through your head." He was toying with her, not even bothering to counterattack, clearly amused by her struggle. "You always keep that emotionless look on your face. Kind of boring, really," Zanku remarked. "But the expression people make the moment they're beheaded? Now that's something I never get tired of. Most of them have this dumbfounded look and let out a little huh? Before it's over. I wonder, what kind of face will you make? I can't wait to find out." This is getting exciting. Meanwhile, Kirum, having picked up on subtle noises in the distance, was already on her way. Chapter 95, Kirum slays Akame. Facing Zanku the Beheader, a Tigu user, for the first time was certainly troublesome, especially because of the sheer power of his Tigu, Spectator, and its omnipotent five sights abilities. But Akame had yet to go all out. "So these are your Tigu abilities. However, even if you can read my thoughts, it's meaningless if your body can't keep up," she said. After enduring Zanku's endless chatter, Akame finally made her move. To be fair, it wasn't all pointless talk. Zanku had practically explained his own abilities to her. Akame's speed suddenly surged, far surpassing what it had been before. Even though Zanku could anticipate her thoughts, his body couldn't react in time to match her rapid movements. Normally, Zanku relished toying with his opponents, exposing their every thought word for word, driving them into despair, watching them crumble. That was his greatest source of enjoyment in battle. But against Akame, he didn't dare act so arrogantly. Not only was she incredibly fast, but she was also overwhelmingly strong and carried an immense amount of combat experience. Forced on the defensive, Zanku was pushed back again and again. However, Akame had yet to land a hit. If Mora's aim so much as grazed him, its deadly curse would end the fight in an instant. Realizing that her current approach wasn't getting results, Akame momentarily halted her pursuit. Taking advantage of the brief pause, Zanku caught his breath and cheerfully resumed his chatter. "As expected, I can't underestimate you. After all, you're the infamous killer Akame who wields the demon blade Mora's aim. But this is exactly the kind of battle I was hoping for. This is fun." However, Akame hadn't stopped just to let him recover. She was preparing a more effective strategy. Taking a deep breath, she suddenly shifted into a completely different state. This was the mindlessness state. Now, Zanku would no longer be able to peer into her thoughts. He immediately noticed the change. "You actually entered a state of mindlessness? Impressive." Yet, rather than being intimidated by Akame's power, Zanku only grew more excited. Because he still had a trump card. Spectator's five abilities included insight, farsight, clear sight, and illusion sight, but there was one more. Foresight. By reading the slightest muscle movements, he could predict his opponent's next action before it even happened. "My Tigu also has the ability of foresight. I can see exactly what you'll do next." Now, what will you do? Switching from insight to foresight, Zanku activated his new ability. It seemed he could only use one at a time. With foresight in play, the tide of battle shifted. Zanku quickly gained the upper hand. He even managed to land a hit on Akame, though it was just a minor graze. That sword of yours is seriously unfair. If I had been the one cut just now, I'd be dead. Zanku the beheader quipped. Your Tigu isn't much better. Akame replied coldly. By the way, Akame. How do you deal with the voices? What? The voices of the people I've killed. Whenever it's quiet, I can hear them. They curse me, telling me to hurry up and go to hell. Back when I carried out executions, I heard them every day, but it's getting worse now. Talking helps distract me. So, how do you handle it? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't hear anything. Akame said flatly. Hearing this, Zanku was genuinely shocked. He had assumed that someone like Akame, who had taken countless lives, would be the same as him. He had even considered discussing their shared burden with her. How boring. In that case, just die. Zanku switched abilities again, activating illusion sight. The figure of Zanku in front of Akame's eyes suddenly transformed into Kurum. Illusion sight was a deadly ability that made the target see the person most important to them. Although it could only affect one person at a time, the illusion it created was flawless. This was Zanku's greatest trump card. In his experience, no assassin could bring themselves to kill the person they cherished most. Kurum. Seeing her sister appear before her once again, Akame hesitated. Even though she knew something was off, she froze. And unlike before, this time she couldn't simply steel herself and strike. Just then, Kurum arrived. Hearing Akame call her name but seeing her standing dazed in front of a towering man and noticing that Akame was injured, Kurum immediately sensed something was wrong. Looks like Akame's companion has arrived. Delightful, delightful, Zanku shamelessly greeted Kurum. Since Akame was caught in the illusion, she couldn't hear him, nor could she see the real Kurum behind her. Of course, Zanku himself had no idea that Kurum was actually the person Akame held dearest. You are? Kurum asked. I'm Zanku the beheader. You must be wondering what's going on. Zanku said, never missing a chance to chat. Right now, Akame sees the person she cares about most. It must be amusing, don't you think? Watching her beloved sister kill her? Delightful, delightful. Hearing this, Kurum immediately understood. So that was it, her sister was trapped in an illusion and mistook Zanku for her. Her expression darkened. What angered her wasn't that Akame had mistaken Zanku for her. It was that Akame couldn't bring herself to strike. Without hesitation, she closed the distance in an instant, appearing right next to Akame. Sister, this won't do. Kurum whispered coldly into Akame's ear. You should have cut me down without hesitation. The sister I love isn't as soft-hearted. The sound of Kurum's voice snapped Akame out of the illusion. What? Zanku was stunned. He never expected that Akame's most cherished person would actually encourage her to kill her without a second thought, like a complete lunatic. But he reacted quickly, instantly recognizing Kurum as the bigger threat. Before Akame could act, he decided to take her out first. Zanku immediately turned illusion sight on Kurum, making himself appear as Akame in her eyes. He refused to believe this crazy girl would actually attack her beloved sister. But in this critical moment, he had no time to waste on words. He lunged straight at Kurum. Yet Kurum didn't hesitate for even a second. She knew exactly where the real Akame was. And if necessary, she was perfectly capable of cutting her down. With a swift motion, she activated Yotsufusa, summoning all of her corpse puppets except for Death to Cool. They launched an all-out assault on Zanku from every angle. Zanku had never encountered Yotsufusa's abilities before, and for the first time, he panicked. Completely unprepared, he was instantly overwhelmed, his arms severed, his abdomen pierced. Before he could even process what was happening, Kurum was already upon him. The entire sequence of events, from Kurum snapping Akame out of the illusion to Zanku's downfall, happened in mere moments. Even Akame, who had just regained her senses, hadn't had a chance to intervene. Lying on the ground, fatally wounded, Zanku looked up at the glinting blade of Yotsufusa above him. But strangely, he felt no fear. Because, for the first time in years, the voices had gone silent. Cough. Cough. He spat out blood, using the last of his strength to mutter, delightful, delightful. The voices are gone. Thanks. No need. Kurum replied expressionlessly, not bothering to understand his words. She simply drove Yotsufusa into him one last time, turning Zanku into yet another of her corpse puppets. Watching Zanku rise again under Yotsufusa's control, Akame felt a strange sense of conflict. But in the end, she remained silent. Sister, the mission's complete. Let's head back. Kurum said cheerfully. It was as if nothing had happened despite the fact that she had just killed her sister in the illusion. Chapter 96, Kurom is acting spoiled again. By the time Akame and Kurom returned to the night raid base, it was already quite late. For Blaine and Kurom, this was their first time visiting the base. Nestled in the mountains, the night raid base was well hidden from the back, shielded by towering peaks. However, from the front, it was completely exposed. Even so, the Empire had yet to discover its location. It wouldn't be surprising if your base got discovered one of these days, Blaine remarked. Leon laughed heartily. Don't sweat the details. But are you really fine with me knowing where your base is? Blaine asked. After all, he wasn't part of Night Raid or the Revolutionary Army. His cooperation with them was only temporary. No problem. Najunda replied. After today's mission, we all agree that you and Kurom are trustworthy allies, so bringing you here isn't an issue. But don't forget. Blaine reminded her bluntly, once Honest's regime falls, our ideals will clash. That's fine. We'll just move to a new base. Najunda said nonchalantly. Alright then. Blaine didn't push the issue further. There was no need for him to worry about their affairs. Speaking of which, Akame and Kurom should be back by now. It's already this late. Shiel commented. Najunda nodded. It's about time. I told them not to linger in the Imperial capital too long, even if they couldn't find Zanku the Beheader. Then, glancing at Blaine and Kurom, she added, since it's so late, why don't you both stay the night? We have plenty of spare rooms. Works for me. Blaine had no reason to refuse, especially since Kurom hadn't returned yet. He wasn't about to leave without her. Just then, Leon felt something was off. After a moment of thought, she realized what it was. Mine hadn't said a single word. At a time like this, Mine not voicing her opinion felt oddly unnatural. Leon grinned and sidled up to her, whispering, Hey, Mine, don't you hate Blaine? The boss just invited him to stay the night, but you don't seem to mind at all. Caught off guard, Mine instinctively tensed. I'm not some unreasonable person, okay? Besides, that guy did pretty well today, so I guess I can acknowledge him a little. Hearing this, Leon's grin widened knowingly. She seemed to have figured something out, but she chose not to say anything. After a while, Akame and Kurom returned as expected. How did the mission go? Najunda asked immediately. The mission is complete. Kurom killed Zanku the Beheader. Akame reported. As expected, Kurom is impressive. You two working together make for an unstoppable team. Najunda remarked. Before this, Kurom had been one of the Revolutionary Army's most feared enemies, a top assassin of the Empire. Now, she had more or less become one of their own. Commander, Zanku the Beheader is now part of Yatsufusa. His abilities seem decent, but unfortunately, they're useless against me. Kurom said as she walked over to Blaine, looking like a child awaiting praise. And she wasn't wrong. Spectator's abilities were almost entirely countered by Kurom. Insight, which allowed Zanku to read his opponent's thoughts, was ineffective against Kurom's corpse puppets. After all, they had no thoughts to read. Farsight and Clearsight weren't suited for combat to begin with. Foresight was similar to the Sharingan in function, but Zanku's physical abilities were no match for Kurom's. Foresight alone couldn't bridge the gap between them, especially when she had Yatsufusa. As for Illusion Sight, that was completely useless. If Kurom ever needed to kill Akame, she would do it without hesitation. Well done, Blaine said, recognizing that Kurom was looking for praise. But she still seemed unsatisfied. She slightly lifted herself onto her toes, clearly expecting a head pat. Blaine hesitated for a moment. Seeing her eager gaze, he finally raised his hand and patted her head. Kurom beamed with joy. Akame, watching from the side, froze in place. The relationship between Blaine and Kurom. This wasn't normal, was it? Would a simple superior and subordinate act like that? Then again, maybe it wasn't impossible. She recalled how, despite Kurom's usual cold demeanor toward outsiders, she was actually quite warm at heart. Back when they were in the Imperial Assassination Unit together, Kurom often clung to her. Akame wasn't the best at reading people, so even though she initially felt something was off about Blaine and Kurom's interactions, she quickly brushed aside her suspicions. Meanwhile, the others had also taken notice. No one said anything, but certain individuals were deep in thought, particularly Mine and Chelsea. Watching Blaine and Kurom's close interaction, Mine felt an inexplicable irritation welling up inside her. No, wait. Why am I getting annoyed? Who cares what that guy does? She lightly patted her own cheeks, trying to shake off the feeling. Compared to Mine, Chelsea was much more self-aware. She had already noticed Blaine and Kurom's unusual relationship back when she infiltrated the assassination unit disguised as a black cat. Now that she had acknowledged her own feelings for Blaine, seeing him interact so intimately with Kurom did make her a little jealous. As much as she hated to admit it, she had broken one of an assassin's biggest taboos. She, someone who could die on a mission at any time, had actually developed feelings for someone. It was reckless, it was foolish, but now that it had happened, she had no intention of regretting it. Someday, if she got the chance. She wanted Blaine to praise her too. It's getting late. Blaine, Kiram, pick whichever room you like, but fair warning, most of them haven't been used in a while, so they're probably covered in dust. Najunda said. If you need help cleaning up, just let us know. Akame was the first to speak. I want to sleep with Kiram, so she can stay in my room. Of course. As long as you're fine with it. Najunda said with a nod. It's fine. Akame affirmed. I want to sleep with my sister too. Kiram said happily. Alright then. Let's clean up Blaine's room. Najunda suddenly gave Blaine a look of sympathy. You don't have to worry about me that much. Blaine muttered, feeling a bit exasperated. Before long, his room was tidied up. But while the others left, Chelsea remained. Chelsea? Not heading to bed? Blaine asked. Chapter 97, Chelsea's proactive strike. Chelsea showed no intention of leaving. Instead, she casually sat down on Blaine's bed. Remember back at the Imperial Assassination Unit's base? We slept together every night, and you were always all over me. She teased, propping herself up on her hands. That was because I didn't know you were actually the Black Cat. Blaine replied, feeling slightly awkward. True. Chelsea said with a smirk. But now that Kiram's gone off to sleep with Akame, how about I keep you company tonight? Don't joke about things like that. Blaine assumed she was just messing with him, so he remained calm. I'm not joking. Or is it that you had no problem when I was a little black cat, but now that I'm a beautiful girl, you're getting shy? Chelsea's grin turned a little mischievous. Do whatever you want. If you really don't mind, then I don't either. Blaine said indifferently, refusing to take the bait. If she was serious, well, he wouldn't exactly be at a disadvantage. But there was no way she was serious. Any second now, she'd huff and leave in embarrassment. That was exactly what Blaine expected. And sure enough, Chelsea stood up, tossing the stick from her finished lollipop into the trash. Whatever I want. Huh? You said it. She said playfully before heading for the door. Blaine watched her go, unsurprised. As expected, she was just messing with him. She wouldn't actually go through with something so bold. Or would she? After Chelsea left, Blaine went to take a shower and prepare for bed. But just as he was about to lie down, there was a soft knock on his door. Who would come this late? Blaine frowned in confusion. It couldn't be Chelsea again, could it? He got up and opened the door only to find that, yes, it really was Chelsea. This time, however, she had already changed into her pajamas, her damp hair showing signs of a recent bath. In her arms, she clutched a pillow. What are you doing? Blaine was momentarily speechless. Was she actually serious about sleeping here? You said it was up to me, didn't you? So here I am. Chelsea said with a playful smile. Then, without hesitation, she turned around, closed the door behind her, and locked it. With that, she walked over and placed her pillow on Blaine's bed. Are you serious? Blaine suddenly felt like he'd been completely caught off guard. He never imagined she wasn't joking. What else? Chelsea sat back down on his bed, her face showing not a hint of embarrassment. I already told you, I wasn't joking. And honestly, I get kind of scared of the dark when I'm alone. If I'm with you, I won't have to worry about that. That last part was a lie. A trained assassin afraid of the dark? Ridiculous. She had only said it to cover up the bit of shyness creeping up on her. After all, no matter how bold she acted, she was still a girl around Blaine's age. Is that so? Blaine didn't bother questioning whether she was telling the truth. What mattered was that this situation was already crazy enough. Sure, he had slept beside Chelsea in her black cat form for days, but that was completely different. Back then, he hadn't even been sure if the cat had originally been a boy or a girl. Sleeping beside a cat and sleeping beside an actual girl were two entirely different things. If she had transformed back into her human form back then, he never would have touched her so casually. And by touching, all he had really done was rest his hand on the small cat's body for convenience. That way, if she made any sudden movements, he would wake up immediately. Now, though, Blaine didn't say much. He simply lay down as if nothing was out of the ordinary. If she, as a girl, wasn't embarrassed, it would be ridiculous for him to start acting shy. But this bed is kind of small, don't you think it's a bit cramped? Blaine suddenly realized the issue. It's fine. If it's too small, we'll just sleep closer together. Chelsea said casually. Alright. Blaine shifted slightly toward the edge of the bed, maintaining some distance so it wouldn't feel too crowded. The room was pitch dark, and they were lying back to back. Neither could see the other's face. Because of that, Blaine didn't notice the faint blush that had crept onto Chelsea's cheeks. Despite all her confidence earlier, she couldn't completely suppress her nervousness. After coming to terms with her feelings for Blaine, even if she wasn't entirely sure what those feelings meant yet, she had decided to trust her instincts. Especially since she had already identified Kirom as her biggest rival. And then there were mine and even Sarah as potential threats. With so much competition, she figured she might as well take the initiative and make her move before anyone else did. Besides, she was naturally bold and outgoing, not like mine, who always played hard to get. She was going to win. Chelsea was even thinking that if she made her move now, maybe Blaine wouldn't be able to resist. He was a guy, after all. And at his age, well, if things went all the way, that wouldn't be so bad either. It would be exciting, actually. But then she calmed down. That was rushing things way too much. She had never done anything like that before. Just thinking about it made her a little nervous. Better to start with something simple, maybe just holding hands or a kiss. However, just as Chelsea was lost in her thoughts, Blaine had already fallen asleep. After a long while, she still hadn't felt him move. "Blaine, are you asleep?" she whispered. Blaine, who had only been in a light sleep, woke up instantly. But instead of answering, he chose to stay silent and continue sleeping. All she could hear in response was the steady rhythm of his breathing. He really had fallen asleep. Chelsea blinked in surprise before letting out a quiet, self-deprecating laugh. She had spent all this time overthinking things, getting herself flustered. And yet this guy just fell asleep like it was nothing. Now she felt like she had been getting worked up over nothing. And, honestly, that made her feel a little embarrassed. At this point, she had to admit she was feeling a bit frustrated. So, as revenge, she decided to pull a little prank on Blaine. Chapter 98, Mine Flips Out. Chelsea quietly slipped out of bed, tiptoeing toward the door and deliberately unlocking it. Blaine, who had yet to fall back asleep, heard the sound of the lock clicking open. What is she up to now? Judging from the sounds, Chelsea hadn't left the room. Instead, she had quietly returned to bed. Not understanding her intentions, Blaine didn't think much of it. But then just as she got under the covers, Chelsea suddenly wrapped her arms around him from behind. His body tensed slightly. Although he quickly relaxed, Chelsea still noticed. As an experienced assassin, her senses were razor sharp. She caught even the slightest reaction. "So you were awake after all?" she thought to herself, a mischievous smile tugging at her lips. She tightened her embrace slightly, resting her chin on his shoulder. Then, leaning in close to his ear, she spoke in a sultry voice. "Why are you ignoring me when you're obviously awake?" To top it off, she playfully blew a soft breath against his ear. Like most people, Blaine's ears were sensitive. With an exasperated sigh, he immediately covered them with his hands. "I just want to sleep. Why do you always have to make things complicated?" "I can't fall asleep yet," Chelsea replied casually. "Then count sheep," Blaine said flatly. "Don't be so cold. If you coax me a little, I might just fall asleep right away," she said, her voice teasing. "Enough. Just go to sleep," Blaine said, feeling increasingly helpless. He had no clue how to coax a girl to sleep. That kind of thing was completely beyond him, and just imagining it made him cringe. Besides, Chelsea was clearly toying with him. If he played along, she'd only take things further. "Fine, I'll stop. But you have to be my pillow," she suddenly demanded. "Do whatever you want," Blaine muttered. Satisfied, Chelsea settled in, using him as her personal pillow. Sleeping like this felt a little strange, but her body was soft and warm, making it surprisingly comfortable. Meanwhile, in Akame's room, she and Kirom had been lying awake for a long time, chatting about various things. "By the way, sister, what was that sound Zanku the beheader mentioned before he died?" Kirom suddenly recalled the strange words he had spoken in his final moments. "Oh, that. He probably killed too many people, good, bad, innocent, it didn't matter. So after death, their voices haunted him, constantly demanding his life. But I think that was just his own guilt manifesting," Akame explained. She, too, had taken many lives, especially during her time in the Imperial Assassination Unit. She had killed people who shouldn't have been killed. But she had always understood the nature of her work. Her mind was strong, and she had never heard any lingering voices. "I see. I think he was just overthinking it," Kirom said with a light smile, unconcerned. The next morning, Blaine had slept reasonably well. However, since he and Chelsea had gone to bed late, they naturally woke up later than the rest of night trade. Shield decided to wake Chelsea first, but after knocking on the door several times, there was no response. She called out a few times, still nothing. So, she tried the door and found that it was strangely unlocked. Upon entering, she saw that Chelsea's bed was empty. The quilt was there, but her pillow was missing. She immediately went to inform the others. Everyone, Chelsea is missing. I thought she was still sleeping in, but she's already gone? Mine asked. No, I don't think so, because her pillow is missing too. Sheil said. If she went out, she wouldn't need to take her pillow, right? Maybe she's sleeping somewhere else? Sheil was too naive to think in any other direction, assuming Chelsea had simply moved to another spot. Mine, however, immediately sensed something was off. Wait, you said her pillow is missing? Yeah. Sheil nodded. She's not in her room, and her pillow is gone. Where else could she be? Lubbock started thinking. No way. Could it be? A thought popped into his head, and his eyes widened. It was just a wild idea, but it wasn't entirely impossible. What if Chelsea had taken her pillow to Blaine's room? What if something indescribable had happened? And then, in the morning, she'd wake up blushing, stretch lazily, and say, "Good morning, darling." The mere thought made Lubbock break out in a cold sweat. No, I have to confirm if Chelsea is in Blaine's room. But before he could act, Mine was already striding off ahead of him, not saying a word. Watching their strange reactions, Sheil tilted her head in confusion. Nadunda paid no attention to any of this, continuing her work as long as Chelsea wasn't in danger. As for Akame and Kiram, they were still asleep, having stayed up even later than Blaine and Chelsea the previous night. Mine was the first to reach Blaine's room. I'm coming in. Impatient as always, she knocked but didn't wait for a response before turning the handle. Luckily for her, Chelsea had unlocked the door last night, so Mine was able to open it with ease. One glance at the bed, and she instantly noticed something was off. The blankets were visibly lumpy in a way that wasn't normal. Though her height of 1.55 meters, 5 feet 1 inch, made it hard to see Chelsea's head, the shape of the covers clearly indicated that there were 2 people underneath. Chelsea, you really are here. Mine's face turned red with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She had already been 90% sure that Chelsea was in here. But seeing it confirmed was a different story. At this moment, Blaine was actually awake. He had already heard Mine knocking earlier. But there was a problem. Chelsea had latched onto him like an octopus, making it impossible for him to sit up. Chelsea, too, was awake. But instead of reacting, she pretended to be asleep just to mess with Mine. Seeing no response from the bed, Mine grew even more impatient. She didn't know why, but this whole situation was irritating her. Without hesitation, she marched over and yanked the blanket away. And there it was. Chelsea, clinging tightly to Blaine like an octopus, wrapped around him so snugly that there was no denying it. You too. Mine's twin tails practically stood on end, her whole face burning red. Chapter 99, The Little Tsundere. Meanwhile, Lubbock and Leon peeked into the room from outside the door, watching the situation unfold. Before long, Sheil joined them, sticking her head in as well. Seeing Chelsea actually lying in Blaine's bed, Lubbock instantly felt a surge of jealousy. He clenched his teeth and bit down on his sleeve to vent his frustration. Damn it. Why don't I ever have this kind of luck? Haha, how youthful. Leon chuckled. Sheil, however, didn't quite understand the situation. She tilted her head in confusion. Chelsea chose to sleep in Blaine's bed. Does that mean it's more comfortable than her own? Wait, seriously? That's what you're thinking? Lubbock was dumbfounded. Looking at Sheil's genuinely puzzled expression, he realized she wasn't joking. She really didn't get it. He had always known she was a bit of an airhead, but to this extent? That was unexpected. Sheil is just pure-hearted, unlike you, who spends all day thinking about nonsense. Leon scolded Lubbock. Lubbock had no comeback. But soon, his focus shifted back to Blaine and Chelsea. At that moment, Chelsea groggily opened her eyes, rubbing them sleepily. She looked like she had just woken up. Instead of letting go of Blaine, she nuzzled her face against his back like a cat, completely ignoring the fuming Mine standing nearby. Get up already. Mine snapped. Chelsea finally turned her head toward Mine and lazily greeted, Good morning, Mine. Good morning. Mine instinctively responded but immediately realized something was off. This wasn't the time for pleasantries. Just get up already. She huffed. And you too, Blaine. It's already late. Why are you still in bed? I'd like to get up, but Chelsea's making it a little difficult. Blaine said helplessly. Hearing that, Mine immediately tried to pull Chelsea off him. However, Chelsea clung on tightly, and since Mine wasn't as strong as her, she couldn't budge her no matter how hard she tried. Alright, that's enough. Time to get up. Blaine finally said. Hearing the seriousness in his voice, Chelsea let go. Otherwise, she probably would have kept teasing Mine a little longer. Hugging her pillow, she got out of bed. Mine stood with her arms crossed, still looking annoyed. The blush on her face hadn't faded, But it wasn't out of embarrassment, it was because she couldn't help but react to seeing Blaine and Chelsea, alone together in the same bed. Blaine also got up and prepared to wash up. "So, Chelsea, you had a perfectly fine bed in your own room. Why did you come here instead?" Mine questioned Chelsea, clearly bothered by the situation. "Because I felt like it," Chelsea replied casually with a smile, raising a finger. "Besides, didn't I infiltrate the Empire's assassination unit before? Back then, I actually slept with Blaine every day, so I'm already used to it. This. You guys." Mine was at a loss for words. Chelsea continued, "Oh, and by the way, Blaine even forced me to do some rather embarrassing things." Her expression turned slightly coy, but there wasn't a hint of resentment whether it was just an act or something genuine, only Chelsea knew. "What?" Mine's face instantly turned an even deeper shade of red. She glared at Blaine, stumbling over her words. "Why, you actually did such shameless things to Chelsea?" Outside the door, Lubbock was on the verge of tears, overwhelmed with jealousy. If only the girl he liked would sleep beside him and do some embarrassing things together. No, even just lying next to each other would be enough. He could die happy. Oh my, looks like Chelsea and Blaine have quite a close relationship," Leon mused, stroking her chin with a knowing smile. Even though Chelsea hadn't shown any real signs of romantic feelings toward Blaine, it was obvious she was having fun messing with Mine. But still, if their relationship weren't at least somewhat special, what kind of girl would boldly sneak into a guy's bed? "Well, as long as we all get along with Blaine, that's the most important thing." Sheil, ever pure-hearted, genuinely believed it was a good thing that Chelsea and Blaine were getting along so well. "No, Chelsea is just deliberately saying things that are easy to misunderstand," Blaine said flatly. "I don't believe you." Mine huffed, though deep down, she felt a small sense of relief. After all, Chelsea was exactly the type to pull pranks like this. "But that aside, whether I sleep with Blaine or not doesn't really have anything to do with you, does it? So why do you seem so worked up about it?" With a sly smirk, Chelsea suddenly shifted the focus onto Mine, clearly enjoying herself. I am not." Mine instantly grew flustered. "Who said I care? I just can't stand how shameless you two are. You barely even know each other." She turned her face away with a huff, unwilling to meet Blaine's gaze. But her agitated tone, her flushed cheeks, and the way she kept trying to explain herself all betrayed her true feelings. Chelsea's words, however, struck a chord with Mine. Why was she so bothered by this? It really had nothing to do with her, yet she couldn't shake this uncomfortable feeling. Unable to make sense of her emotions, Mine instinctively blamed Blaine. Damn him. He was just some guy she had barely started to acknowledge, and now he was acting all cocky. This was all his fault. Chelsea let out a satisfied hum. She had completely seen through Mine. The more Mine tried to deny it, the more obvious it became. Chelsea was almost certain now Mine had started developing feelings for Blaine, though it seemed even Mine herself hadn't realized it yet. Definitely a potential threat. But fortunately, Mine was a stubborn son deer. Chelsea didn't have much to worry about. It was clear she had already won. Chapter 100, like an old married couple. To be honest, Chelsea was just using this opportunity to gauge Mine's true feelings toward Blaine. Now, she had her answer. After the brief commotion, Mine left Blaine's room. It wasn't until then that she noticed Lubbock, Leon, and Sheil lingering outside the door, clearly eavesdropping and peeking in. They hadn't exactly been subtle, but Mine had been too distracted to notice earlier. "You guys." She suddenly realized that Leon and the others had seen everything that just happened. It wasn't a big deal, but for some reason, it felt a little awkward. "Come on, let's go wake up Akame and Kuram." It's been so long since they reunited, so they probably stayed up talking late into the night. Acting as if nothing had happened, Leon turned and headed toward Akame's room. Since Akame never locked her door, Leon and the others walked in without hesitation. Inside, Akame and Kuram were still fast asleep, curled up together. Both sisters looked completely at peace, faint smiles lingering on their faces as they slept. Seeing how close and comfortable they were, Leon and the others hesitated, wondering if they should just let them sleep a little longer. But before they could decide, Akame slowly opened her eyes. "Sorry, looks like I overslept." She rubbed her eyes groggily, and upon seeing Mine, Leon, and the others standing by the bed, she immediately understood the situation. "I was thinking we shouldn't wake you, but it looks like you're already up," Leon said with a smile. As their voices filled the room, Kuram stirred and slowly opened her eyes. "Good morning, sister." Her soft voice was so gentle that anyone who didn't know her would never believe she was a ruthless assassin. "Morning, Kuram." Akame smiled and gently pressed her forehead against Kuram's. Watching this exchange, Mine and the others found it hard to believe that, during their final battle against Prime Minister Honest, Kiram had truly intended to kill Akame. Meanwhile, Blaine and Chelsea were washing up in the bathroom. This world had basic toiletries, including a vanity mirror and other essentials. As Blaine was brushing his teeth, Chelsea suddenly reached out her hand. Blaine glanced at her in confusion, and Chelsea gestured with her eyes toward the cup. Since there was only one cup and she couldn't be bothered to go back to her own room, she simply decided to share it with Blaine. Blaine looked at the cup in his hand, already in use, and asked, "I've already used this. You sure you still want it? What else? Don't tell me you're embarrassed just because we're sharing a cup?" Chelsea took the opportunity to tease him. "Alright then." Blaine said nothing more and simply handed the cup over. At this point, he felt like he was becoming desensitized to things like this. If it happened again, he figured he'd just hand the cup to Chelsea without a second thought. Chelsea, however, didn't push her luck and simply washed up as usual. The two of them shared the sink and the cup in a calm and natural manner, almost like an old married couple. Although Akame woke up a little late, it was still within breakfast time. She and Kiram prepared breakfast together for everyone. Of course, while cooking, the two had already snuck quite a few bites. Still, the final meal was more than enough, as what they had eaten could barely count as an appetizer. Even for breakfast, Akame and Kiram had filled their own plates with meat. Meanwhile, the portions for everyone else were much more balanced. "Commander, I made this for you." Kiram personally handed a plate of food to Blaine. "Thanks." Blaine accepted it without hesitation. Chelsea ate her breakfast as usual, not openly glancing at Kiram but keeping an eye on her from the corner of her vision. Kiram was an obvious potential rival, and compared to mine, she was much more straightforward. In Chelsea's eyes, Kiram posed the greatest threat. After finishing breakfast and resting for a bit, Blaine said, "Alright, Kiram and I should be heading back. Thanks again for yesterday. If not for you two, it would have been much harder to complete both missions at once." Najandu said. "If you ever need our help, just let us know." "Got it." Blaine nodded slightly. Then, he and Kiram mounted a flying danger beast and set off for their base. As they took off, Kiram did something different from usual. Instead of holding on to Blaine's clothes with one hand, she simply sat directly on his lap. "Commander, hold me," Kiram said matter-of-factly. "That way, I can use both hands to eat my cookies." It actually made sense. If Blaine held her from behind, she wouldn't need to use one hand to keep steady. "Alright." Blaine, unfazed by Kiram's insistence, wrapped an arm around her waist. "This should be fine." "Not enough. I want you to hold me with both hands, or I won't feel secure." Kiram pushed her request even further. Blaine sighed but complied, wrapping both arms around her. Satisfied, Kiram sat comfortably on his lap, happily munching on her cookies. When they arrived at the Ecchi cavern, the workers were still busy expanding the base. As for food and lodging, Blaine had taken care of that from the start. He had specifically hired a professional cook, ensuring that the workers had plenty to eat. Sleeping arrangements were simpler; they had to make do with tents. But even those were provided along with temporary furniture. The conditions weren't perfect, but Blaine had already paid the workers half their wages, with the rest to be settled upon completion. With that much money promised, the workers were highly motivated. Besides, they were used to hardship. Sleeping in tents was nothing to them, especially with the extra furniture Blaine had provided. Even if they had to sleep directly on the ground, they'd consider it worth it for the pay. "Master, where did you two go yesterday?" Seeing Blaine and Kiram return, Sarah immediately asked. "We went to Night Raid's base." Blaine answered truthfully. "Night Raid? Aren't they rebels?" "Well, if you think about it, in the Empire's eyes, Akatsuki is also considered a rebel. But that's not the point," Blaine explained. "The point is, for now, our goals align with Night Raid's." He continued, "We can work together when needed. They don't see us as enemies. The enemy of my enemy is my friend." "I see. That makes sense." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, quickly accepting his reasoning. Blaine considered something for a moment. If Sarah got to know Akame and the others, it might help change her perspective. "Next time, I'll introduce you to them." Chapter 101, Generalist Eths recall Imperial Capital, Royal Palace. Inside a certain palace, the young emperor was already in court, with Prime Minister Honest standing beside him. Despite holding the title of emperor, he was still just a child, a young boy with light green hair. A soldier stepped forward and reported that 2 more generals had defected. Why 2 more? Because this wasn't the first time high-ranking officials had fled to the Revolutionary Army. The court officials murmured anxiously, troubled by the Revolutionary Army's growing strength. But then, the young emperor stood up and spoke with surprising authority. "There is no need for my ministers to be afraid. Those rebels are nothing more than ignorant southern peasants. We can deal with them at any time. It's actually better to let them gather together once they do, We can wipe them out in one swift strike. That is the most efficient way. After delivering his speech with great conviction, the young emperor turned to Prime Minister Honest. Minister, that should be fine, right? Very good, very good. As expected of your majesty, so calm and wise. Honest chuckled, gnawing on a large chunk of meat right in the middle of the court. His blatant disregard for the dignity of the palace was clear, but no one dared to voice their objections. Anyone who spoke out would be dragged away, and being torn apart by horses would be one of the more merciful punishments. His Majesty is correct. Compared to the southern rebels, the real threat lies with the criminals lurking right under our noses. Honest added between bites of his meal. My dear relative, Ecchi, was murdered by those scoundrels. And then there's Zanku the beheader killed as well. Not that I care about him, but the important thing is that his ego was stolen by those wretches from night trade. They are becoming too brazen. It's making me so upset that my appetite has skyrocketed. My weight keeps going up, too. Honest furiously tore into his meat, his words completely contradicting themselves, claiming to be upset while blaming his ever-growing appetite. After Ecchi's assassination, Honest had been the first in the palace to receive the news. There was no solid proof linking night trade to the act, but anyone with common sense knew there was no other possibility. Honest had already made up his mind it was definitely night raid's doing. He had no real concern for his relative's death, and in fact, his appetite had only increased. But that didn't mean he would let night trade go unpunished. But those rats are strong. Just to be safe, let's recall General Esdeath from the northern campaign and bring her back to the capital. His decision was set: night trade had to be eliminated. Still, we must remain vigilant until Esdeath returns. Make sure those useless Imperial police actually do their jobs and tighten security. I won't waste money keeping a bunch of deadweights around. Oh, right, what about the Imperial assassination unit? Can't we use them? The young emperor suddenly recalled the elite assassins created by the Empire. A significant sum had been taken from the treasury to form that unit. No idea. I'll ask Skiyu about it next time I see him. Honest replied offhandedly. In truth, he was just brushing the emperor off. As far as Honest was concerned, the Imperial assassination unit was already worthless. Most of its elite members were either dead, defected, or had run away. By then, he had already lost interest in them. That Blaine boy who he once saw potential in was probably executed by Skiyu. What remained of the unit was likely nothing but a pack of nobodies. If any of them still had decent strength, he could always handpick them and place them under Esdeath's command. In Honest's eyes, Esdeath alone was more than enough to crush the rebels. And with Esdeath recruiting even more powerful subordinates, victory would be inevitable. To him, the Revolutionary Army wasn't the only concern. General Bdo and his so-called conscience faction posed an equal, if not greater, threat. That was why Honest had an insidious plan in mind, one that would escalate tensions between Bdo, Night Raid, and the rebels, ensuring they could never unite against him. After Prime Minister Honest issued the order, the royal palace immediately relayed it to Esdeath at the northern border using the fastest means possible, flying danger beasts. Esdeath received the command that very same day. Although she had already crushed the northern tribes in the fortress city, many remnants still lingered beyond the Empire's borders. However, she had no real interest in wiping them out completely. Instead, she chose to obey Honest's order not because she had to, but because returning to the capital meant she could indulge in even more thrilling battles. Compared to the weak northern tribes, whom she regarded as mere insects, Night Raid, where every member wielded a tigu, was far more intriguing. The stronger the opponent, the more exhilarating the fight. Of course, aside from Night Raid, there was someone else who piqued her interest even more: Blaine. The mere thought of him brought a love-struck smile to her face, her cheeks faintly flushed. At that moment, the stark contrast between this expression and her usual cold, ruthless demeanor was almost jarring. Blaine. Wait for me. Chapter 102, Falling in Love. Only 4 people returned from the northern fortress city to the imperial capital, Esdeath and her 3 beasts. The rest of the soldiers remained stationed at the fortress, ensuring that any remnants of the northern tribes outside the empire would not attempt another invasion. With the northern tribes' main force led by Numasika, the hero of the north, completely crushed by Esdeath, the remaining troops at the fortress were more than capable of handling any stragglers. It's rare to see such an expression on Lady Esdeath's face. Even the mighty General Esdeath has fallen in love after all. Noticing Esdeath's faint blush, Liver, one of the 3 beasts, couldn't help but sigh. Yeah. Before this, I never would have imagined that Lady Esdeath had this side to her. Even now, Niall found it hard to believe. The 3 beasts knew Esdeath well after all, they had followed her through countless battles. They had always assumed that someone as battle-crazed as Esdeath wouldn't be interested in any man. Daidara, on the other hand, had no interest in this conversation. His mind was preoccupied with finding ways to gain more experience points. I really want to meet the man Lady Asdeath likes. Nia said, his tone filled with curiosity rather than expectation. He was simply wondering what kind of person could possibly catch Asdeath's eye. No rush. Once Lady Asdeath returns to the capital, that man will become our superior. Liver replied calmly. Asdeath had already informed them that before long, Blaine would not only serve as a deputy general in the army but also as their direct superior in the Three Beasts. The sudden addition of a new commanding officer didn't bother them in the slightest. This was Asdeath's decision, and they obeyed her without question. Liver, for instance, owed his very freedom to Asdeath. If she hadn't chosen him as a member of the Three Beasts, he would have rotted away in a dungeon for the rest of his life. He knew firsthand how dark the Empire truly was. He had been one of its victims. But now, he didn't serve the Empire. He served Asdeath. Her orders were the only ones that mattered. Asdeath's authority within the Empire was absolute. If she refused to do something, not even the Emperor or Prime Minister Honest could force her. Honest, for his part, never interfered with Asdeath's decisions. He understood her personality well enough to know that letting her do as she pleased was the safest course of action. Nia stretched, placing his hands behind his head. Right, he'll be our boss soon. I'm getting excited. Little did he know, the chances of Blaine actually becoming Asdeath's deputy were slim to none. During the time before Asdeath's return, Blaine and the others were far from idle. Blaine planned to initiate contact between his Akatsuki members and Night Raid. While their ideals clashed somewhat with the Revolutionary Army, Blaine's deeper interactions with Night Raid had shown him that they weren't entirely unreasonable. For instance, despite Mind's short temper, she at least listened to what he had to say, which meant there was room for negotiation. At the same time, Blaine intended to gradually expand Akatsuki's influence. His goal wasn't to recreate the elite, small-scale Akatsuki of Nagato's era but rather the larger organization from Yahiko's time, though back then, most of its members had ultimately perished. To expand Akatsuki, they had to start making moves. Blaine had already dispatched several members to the imperial capital to gather intelligence. These operatives, formerly of the Empire's assassination unit, remained unknown in the capital, meaning they weren't subject to wanted notices like Akame. Even Skiu, despite overseeing the assassination unit, had never seen their faces. He viewed assassins as disposable tools used and discarded once they had served their purpose. Only top-tier killers like Akame and Kurom ever warranted his attention. In his eyes, no matter how skilled, a workhorse was still just a workhorse. That made it all the more ideal to send everyone except Kurom to infiltrate the capital. Of course, they couldn't just wander around in matching red cloud robes. Strolling through the streets in identical outfits would be as good as announcing, "Hey, we're a secret organization." After these past days of investigation, we've witnessed countless crimes firsthand. The Imperial Capital Security Force barely reacts to any of it. Their patrols have become more frequent and strict, but it's obvious they're focused entirely on Night Raid. The intelligence agents regularly reported back to Blaine, and this time was no different. We only intervene when we're absolutely sure we won't be detected by the security force. If the risk is too high, we can't do anything. The female operative delivering the report had a hint of guilt on her face. To avoid exposing themselves, they had to act with extreme caution even if it meant watching helplessly at times. "It's all right, you've done your best," Blaine reassured her. "I'll handle the rest." Understood. Blaine then received two critical pieces of information. First, some merchants were secretly smuggling drugs, using deception to trap women in addiction and ruin their lives. It was suspected that a powerful figure was shielding them from consequences. Second, Asdeath had successfully crushed the northern tribes and executed hundreds of thousands, burying them alive. She had been recalled to the capital, and the news had already spread. Strangely enough, the public's reaction wasn't fear but admiration. Many citizens now revered her even more. "Oh, and one other thing," the operative added. "We haven't seen any wanted notices for you, Kurom, or Commander Saru anywhere in the capital. By all logic, Skiu should have been aware of what happened at the assassination unit space by now, so why hasn't he taken any action?" "No idea what Skiu is up to, but if there's no bounty on us, that's only to our advantage." That meant Blaine's movements in the capital would be much easier. Out of everything in the report, what concerned him most was Asdeath's imminent return. As she had boldly claimed before departing, it hadn't taken her long to subjugate the northern tribes. Blaine decided that he needed to take care of certain matters before Asdeath arrived, especially dealing with the drug smuggling operation. After that, he would focus entirely on the real threat, Asdeath herself. Chapter 103, Kurom is angry. Blaine's original plan was to take Saru with him to assassinate the drug smugglers and, in the process, announce the existence of the Akatsuki organization to the world. After all, he hadn't founded the Akatsuki organization just to hide away in the Seiga caves. Its ideals needed to be known, or else there was no point in creating it in the first place. Of course, this would inevitably draw threats from the honest regime, but Blaine wasn't afraid of that. However, there was one issue: Kurom was coming with them to the imperial capital. That's fine. Blaine agreed without hesitation. There was no downside to bringing Kurom along, and having an extra reliable fighter was a definite advantage. They traveled together on a flying danger beast. Just like last time, Kurom sat on Blaine's lap. Her smooth, practiced movement made it seem like she had already gotten used to it. Hug me. Even her request was much more direct than before. All right. Blaine was indulgent when it came to Kurom. As long as her requests weren't unreasonable, he had no problem agreeing to them. As before, he gently wrapped his arms around her waist. Watching this, Sarah once again felt that strange sensation creeping up on her. But this time, it wasn't just the tightness in her chest, there was also an unexpected loneliness. She lightly pinched the collar of her shirt, her expression dimming slightly. She felt like there was something wrong with her. That's why she didn't want to mention it to her master. She was an enforcer of justice. If something this trivial could shake her emotions, wouldn't her master be disappointed in her? And yet, she couldn't ignore her instincts. She didn't want to sit there alone. Getting up, Sarah walked behind Blaine and slowly leaned against him, resting her back against his. "Sarah?" Blaine was momentarily confused. Sarah didn't answer. Embarrassed, she just quietly pressed against him, unwilling to explain herself for fear of disappointing her master. Since she didn't respond, Blaine chose not to push the matter. Maybe she didn't sleep well last night and was just tired. That was the most reasonable explanation, he thought. Kurom, though she didn't turn to look, understood what had just happened. She could be selfish at times, often acting on her own whims, but in this instance, she said nothing. Besides, Commander Sarah's naivete made her feel a little sorry for her. At this moment, Blaine had Kurom sitting on his lap while Sarah leaned against him from behind. To be honest, any normal person would start feeling uncomfortable after a while in this position. But with his body enhanced by system points, Blaine didn't feel the slightest discomfort. Still, a thought crossed his mind: was Kurom getting a little too close to him? Sarah was fine, aside from acting a little odd earlier. "Kurom, you know, I'm still a guy. Don't you think it'd be better to keep a little distance from me?" Blaine spoke to Kurom seriously. The moment she heard this, Kurom froze. The hand reaching into her snack bag for a cookie stiffened, and her expression darkened slightly. For a brief moment, she was completely silent. Then, in a soft but pointed voice, she muttered, "Commander? Are you an idiot?" "Huh? What makes you say that?" Blaine was completely baffled. He was just offering some well-intended advice. Why was she reacting like this? An idiot is an idiot. Kurom seemed genuinely upset, her small lips puffing out in frustration. She sulked, refusing to explain. She had assumed that by now, Blaine would have realized how she felt. But instead, he went and said something like that, making it obvious that he was still completely clueless. The more oblivious he was, the harder it was for her to come out and say it directly. Since Kurom remained silent, Blaine could only sit there, thoroughly confused. If even Blaine didn't get it, then Sarah had no chance of understanding. That strange feeling she had earlier had completely disappeared once she got closer to her master. Now, as she listened to the conversation between Blaine and Kurom, she felt like they were speaking an entirely different language. After some time, the flying danger beast carrying the three of them landed a short distance from the imperial capital. They couldn't just ride the danger beast straight into the city, that would be far too conspicuous. From there, they proceeded on foot. With their abilities, scaling the city walls undetected was a simple task. Blaine, Sarah, and Kurom all possessed physical capabilities beyond that of normal humans. After infiltrating the imperial capital, the three of them immediately made their way to the target location. According to the intel we have, the target is located in the red light district of the imperial capital. The exact spot is over there. Standing on a rooftop overlooking red light district, Blaine, clad in his red cloud robe, extended his index finger, pointing toward their destination. Sarah and Kurom stood beside him, also dressed in red cloud robes. This mission wasn't just about assassinating drug dealers, they were also here to spread word of Akatsuki's existence. Naturally, wearing their red cloud robes was a must. Below them stretched the most infamous district of the imperial capital, a place that, to put it bluntly, could make anyone blush and their heart race. Given the level of their opponents, a detailed battle plan wasn't necessary. The drug dealers weren't particularly strong. Blaine led Sarah and Kurom straight into the secret base where their targets were hiding. It was a large, standalone mansion, heavily guarded by men in suits and sunglasses, all armed and patrolling the perimeter. If any outsiders were caught trespassing, these guards would undoubtedly intervene or even attack outright. But against Blaine and his group, this so-called security was meaningless. These guards weren't even Tegu users. As the trio moved past them, the only thing the guards registered was a sudden gust of wind. By the time they turned around, not even a shadow remained, leaving them to assume it was just their imagination. In the blink of an eye, Blaine had led Sarah and Kurom into an attic space above their targets. The sounds of the drug dealers talking below were clear to them. However, inside the attic, Blaine unexpectedly ran into two familiar faces. Sheil and Mine. At that moment, Sheil and Mine had also heard a faint, unusual noise. When they turned around, they were met with the sight of Blaine and his team. Kurom was a face they recognized, but for Sarah, this was their first meeting. Both Sheil and Mine were caught off guard. Sheil remained relatively composed, while Mine barely managed to suppress a startled reaction. On the other side, Blaine and Kurom were equally surprised. Running into Sheil and Mine here was beyond coincidence. But after a moment of thought, the reason became obvious. Nitrade must have accepted a contract to take out the same targets, which was why Sheil and Mine were here. Even so, the timing was uncanny. Since Sarah didn't know Sheil and Mine, her first instinct was to assume they were enemies. Without hesitation, she drew her sword, her killing intent flaring. Chapter 104, The heinous drug dealers. Feeling a strong sense of hostility from Sarah, Mine and Sheil immediately tensed, their expressions turning serious. Without hesitation, they raised their weapons and took defensive stances. Wait, they're not the enemy. Blaine whispered to Sarah. His voice was low enough that the drug dealers below wouldn't hear him. Realizing her mistake, Sarah put her large sword back on her back. Her previously fierce and aggressive expression instantly softened into an awkward smile as she scratched her head. Sorry about that, I thought you were the bad guys. She apologized quietly to Mine and Sheil. Mine and Sheil let out slight sighs of relief. If a fight had broken out, their entire assassination mission could have been compromised. It's fine. Mine replied, then turned to Blaine. So, what are you doing here? We're here to take care of the drug dealers too. We'll talk about the details once the mission is done. Blaine said. Mine nodded. She carefully removed one of the wooden panels from the ceiling and placed it aside. The ceiling was made up of multiple wooden boards supported by an iron framework, allowing for easy assembly and disassembly. Now, through the small opening, they had a direct view of what was happening below. Below them, a group of lavishly dressed women lay sprawled about, none of them able to stand properly. They were smoking opium in unnatural positions, completely intoxicated. It was clear that the merchants were using drugs to destroy these women. Mine's face darkened at the sight, and Sheil's expression grew more solemn. Ha ha ha, looks like they're having a great time. A voice rang out. A man wearing a monocular eye patch and gold chain strolled into the room, likely the drug smuggler. His accomplices followed closely behind. Listen up. Make good money for me, and I'll let you smoke as much as you want. The smuggler used the drugs as bait, luring the women into selling their bodies in places like the red light district. Yes. The women, already hopelessly addicted, couldn't resist the temptation. They had no choice but to keep prostituting themselves in exchange for more opium. The smuggler's gaze shifted to a woman lying in the corner. Her face was ashen, her body lifeless. This one's done for. She reeks. Completely useless now. Just toss her out and find a new replacement. Go grab some dumb girl from the slums. Those worthless pieces of trash will do anything for a bit of money. With no regard for human life, the smuggler discarded the dying woman like garbage, already planning to prey on another victim. It was obvious that all the women hooked on opium had been abducted from the slums, only to be turned into tools for profit. From their vantage point in the ceiling, Blaine, Sheil, and the others silently observed the disgusting scene before them. These merchants are exactly as described in the commission. Sheil stated calmly. Nothing seemed to shake her composure. What a piece of shit. Mine clenched her fists as she took in the miserable state of the women from the slums. No matter what, drug smuggling is an unforgivable crime. Sarah's expression darkened, barely restraining herself from rushing down to deliver justice to this evil. Let's move. Blaine said calmly. Aside from him, Sarah, Kurom, Sheil, and Mine were all Tegu users. Their overwhelming strength made dealing with the merchants and bodyguards effortless. There was no need for any elaborate plan, just strike. With her master's permission, Sarah wasted no time. She stomped down hard, blasting a massive hole in the ceiling. The deafening crash startled the merchants. What? Before the leading merchant could even react, a massive sword came crashing down on his skull. Sarah had dropped from above, swinging her greatsword in a brutal downward strike, splitting the man clean in half. The gruesome sight left the remaining merchants paralyzed in shock. Sarah's vicious grin only made her appear even more terrifying. The commotion immediately drew the attention of the bodyguards outside. They rushed in to check the situation, only to find several unknown intruders assassins. Get them. Kill the intruders. The bodyguards charged forward, confident in their numbers. However, within seconds, they were all dead. Kurome didn't even bother using Yatsufusa's corpse puppets. A single effortless slash was enough to kill each one. Mine's pumpkin cannon took down enemy after enemy. Though her close combat abilities were weak, she was always paired with Shiel, who ensured her protection. Even though the merchants and guards carried firearms, Shiel easily deflected the bullets with her massive scissor-shaped Digu. Wait. Just as Sarah was about to finish off the last remaining merchant, Blaine stopped her. Her raised sword came to an abrupt halt. If he had spoken a second later, the man's head would have burst apart. The merchant collapsed to his knees, his legs giving out in terror. Tears and snot mixed on his face as he sobbed pitifully. Someone's protecting you, aren't they? Who is it? Blaine stepped forward, towering over the trembling man with a cold, piercing gaze. It's Lord Bull. The merchant had already lost all composure. Just one icy glare from Blaine was enough to make him spill everything. Blaine nodded slightly. After getting his answer, he turned and walked away. Even without further instruction, Sarah knew she was free to continue. There was no reason to spare a scumbag like this. Drug smuggling alone warranted a death sentence. Luring and destroying countless women made his crimes even more unforgivable. Koro, eat him. Sarah suddenly changed her mind. Beheading him was far too merciful. Letting Koro devour him alive was much more fitting. Koro cheerfully trotted toward the merchant, nearly stumbling along the way. Seeing the strange-looking but oddly cute dog, the merchant was momentarily dumbfounded. They want this little thing to eat me? Even Mine and Shiel, unfamiliar with Koro, exchanged puzzled glances. Then, in an instant, Koro's head expanded to an enormous size. His body remained the same, but his head grew exponentially, an unnatural transformation far more terrifying than simple size augmentation. The grotesque shift sent a chilling wave of horror through the room. His gaping maw was now large enough to swallow multiple people whole. The merchant's pupil shrank in terror. No. No, please. His scream of pure desperation echoed through the air. Before it was abruptly cut off. Chapter 105, Tiger Mask. After devouring the drug dealer, Koro reverted to its usual adorable appearance. The scene had left a deep impression on both Mine and Shiel. That's not an ordinary danger beast, is it? Mine couldn't help but ask Zero. You're right, but Koro isn't a danger beast. It's a biological Digu. Zero replied with a smile. Mine suddenly felt that the girl before her, along with that biological Digu, was terrifying. The contrast between their appearance in battle and their usual demeanor was like night and day. She had heard of biological Digu before, but this was the first time she had seen one in person. Our mission is complete. You two should be heading back soon, right? Shiel asked Blaine. There's no rush to return just yet. That guy mentioned Bull earlier, and I think we need to deal with him too. Blaine said. In truth, he had already gathered information about Bull from members of the Akatsuki organization. His questioning of the drug dealer was just to confirm the details. The Bull that the dealer spoke of matched what Blaine had learned. An official under-minister honest who abused his power to shield drug dealers. His rank wasn't low either. Blaine planned to use this man to publicly reveal the existence of the Akatsuki organization. With that in mind, he casually pulled out a stack of leaflets and scattered them on the ground. Each black leaflet bore a red fire cloud emblem with the character Akatsuki in the center. What's this? Your organization's symbol? Mine asked curiously, picking up a leaflet. Akatsuki? So that's your group's name? That's right. Blaine nodded. I see. Well, I still think nitrate sounds way better. Mine remarked. Blaine didn't bother responding to that. You're going after Bull now? Shiel asked. Yeah. If we don't eliminate him, the drug smuggling problem won't be solved at its root. Blaine replied. Then. If it's okay, I'd like to help. Shiel offered. Blaine and Kurome had helped nitrate before, and she wanted to return the favor. More than that, she was always willing to lend a hand where she could. After all, fighting was the only thing she was good at. Of course. You're more than welcome. Blaine said without hesitation. Shiel smiled warmly. Shiel, wait, what about me? Mine suddenly felt lost as Shiel made plans to go with Blaine and the others. You can come with us, or you can head back first. Shiel said to Mine. Fine, I'll begrudgingly help out. Mine muttered. Just as she spoke, her gaze accidentally met Blaine's. She quickly looked away with a huff. But don't get the wrong idea. I just don't want to leave Shiel alone. It's not like I actually want to help you or anything. Blaine blinked in mild confusion. I know. Not wasting any more time, he shifted back to the main issue. Let's move now before word of this spreads. Sarah and Kurome nodded, immediately falling in behind Blaine. Mine and Shield followed closely after them. Blaine had already gathered intelligence on Bull's whereabouts long ago. Before long, they arrived at Bull's lavish mansion. Inside the Grand Hall, Bull was in the middle of a business discussion. There are Shing users and Imperial Fist Temple Masters among his bodyguards. Stay alert. I'll move in and capture him alive. Blaine instructed the group beside him. After they nodded in acknowledgement, he sprang into action. Activating the Dojutsu double Kamui once again, Blaine instantly teleported to a position directly behind Bull, who was within his line of sight. Bull was deep in conversation with a drug dealer, negotiating percentages for smuggling operations, specifically the cut he demanded as a protection fee. Huh? Lord Bull, when did someone appear behind you? The drug dealer sitting across from Bull suddenly noticed the figure, an ominous presence clad in unusual attire, wearing an orange tiger skin mask. What? Bull was momentarily stunned, unable to process what was being said. The moment he started to turn his head, Blaine struck. The masked figure was, of course, Blaine himself, and his waist was adorned with the long blade known as the Crimson Night Blade. Under the cover of night, the Crimson Night Blade's effects significantly amplified his abilities. Nothing but advantages, no drawbacks. With a swift motion, Blaine grabbed Bull by the back of the neck and slammed his face down onto the table. Boom. The impact was so forceful that the table caved in beneath him. Although Bull's face was buried in the wreckage, there was no doubt that it had been mangled beyond recognition. Blaine aimed to capture him alive, not kill him immediately. So, he held back at least for now and shifted his focus. The drug dealer, stunned by the sudden attack, took a moment to process the scene before screaming in panic. However, before he could even finish, Blaine, moving with ghostly speed, grabbed his head and slammed it into the ground. Blaine had restrained his strength somewhat, as he still had use for the dealer. But restrain didn't mean weak. The moment the dealer hit the ground, the back of his head smacked against the floor with enough force to knock him unconscious instantly. Clicking his tongue, Blaine glanced at the unmoving body. TCH, maybe I overdid it a little. Let's hope this guy's got a tough skull and doesn't die just yet. The commotion inside quickly alerted the guards outside. Between the loud crash and the screams, they wasted no time reacting. However, most of them were distracted by the simultaneous assault from Kiram and the other three women, leaving only the nearest guards to rush into the hall. Who the hell are you? Release Lord Bull this instant. The lead guard barked at the masked intruder. In the dimly lit hall, the tiger skin mask radiated a far more menacing and oppressive aura than a plain white mask would. Just standing there, Blaine's presence alone sent a chill down the guards' spines. Many hesitated, cold sweat forming on their brows. Seeing their hesitation, the captain's face twisted in rage. What the hell are you idiots waiting for? Get him. If anything happens to Lord Bull, none of you will leave here alive. Shaken by the command, the guards had no choice but to push their fear aside and charge toward the masked intruder. Chapter 106, Slaying the Minister's Lapdogs. Facing the encirclement of guards, Blaine drew the Crimson Night Blade from his waist. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary katana, but a faint mist of blood clung to the blade, giving it an eerie and menacing presence. The head guard was the first to charge at Blaine. He had to rescue Lord Bull as soon as possible. His own life depended on it. As a Shing user, he had more confidence than the other guards. Blaine swung his blade forward, his speed so overwhelming that the guard couldn't even register the movement. All he saw was a flash of light, and by the time he realized what had happened, his throat had already been slit. Gah! The head guard collapsed backward, disbelief filling his eyes. The intruder was this powerful? Could it be Night Raid? That was his last thought before death claimed him. Blaine had no intention of showing mercy to these guards. Ding! The host has killed a Shing user and received a reward, 10 system points. Seeing their leader taken down in an instant, the remaining guards lost their nerve. They were trapped. Running meant death, and fighting was just as likely to end the same way. If they had any chance at survival, it was to flee and find a place to hide. But before they could even make a decision, Blaine was already upon them. Moments later, nearly every guard had been slain. As Blaine prepared to finish off the last remaining one, who lay on the ground, gravely injured, the man still tried to threaten him. Lord Bull is one of the Prime Minister's men. Do you have any idea what will happen if you kill him? Blaine replied coldly, funny. It just so happens that I want to kill the Prime Minister's lapdogs. Under the guard's despairing gaze, Blaine swung the hilt of his sword down. After Blaine finished off the guards, Kiram and the others had also dealt with the ones outside. Before long, they regrouped with Blaine in the lobby. As soon as they entered, they were met with the sight of corpses scattered across the floor and 2 suited men still clinging to life. And then, there was the man wearing a tiger skin mask. Though his build and red cloud robe made it obvious that it was Blaine, Mine still couldn't help but comment, You're wearing another weird mask. And it's different from the last one. I get that assassins wearing masks is normal, but you sure have a lot of them. Blaine casually removed the mask and replied, I just wear whatever. Looks like you've taken care of the guards here too. What about those two? You're not going to deal with them. One of them should be Bull, right? Mine asked, eyeing the two wounded men. Their attire alone made it clear they held higher status than ordinary guards. Yeah, it's this guy. Blaine finally grabbed Bull, whose face had been buried in the table, and lifted him up by the back of his collar. I still have a use for him, so I didn't kill him yet. Bull's face was a mess covered in blood, his features unrecognizable, and several teeth missing. It was hard to tell if he was playing dead or actually unconscious, but it didn't really matter. What do you need him for? Mine asked curiously. You'll find out soon. Blaine replied. Then, his tone turned icy as he addressed Bull. Keep playing dead, and I'll make sure you actually die. He had already noticed Bull's eyelashes twitching unnaturally. The guy was obviously faking it impressive, considering the state he was in. Despite his injuries, he had endured without making a sound. The other man, a drug dealer, was the only one truly unconscious. At Blaine's threat, Bull's eyes snapped open in fear. Talk. Where's all your money? Blaine demanded. In the vault. With his life on the line, Bull didn't dare hold back and confessed immediately. They arrived at the vault doors, where Blaine used Bull's key to unlock the heavy, reinforced entrance. Inside, they were met with the sight of countless gold coins piled high across the floor. For a mid-level official, this kind of wealth was absurd. It was clear how deep his corruption ran, and no doubt a large portion of it came from protecting drug traffickers. Just how much did this bastard steal? Mine muttered, feeling a chill at the sheer scale of it. Get some people to load it into sacks and haul it away. Blaine said flatly. There were still plenty of servants left alive in Bull's mansion, innocent workers who had nothing to do with his crimes. They could help, and in return, they'd be rewarded with a share of the gold, effectively freeing them from servitude. As expected, many of them were more than willing to assist. One sack after another, the gold was packed up and loaded onto carts. Blaine then grabbed Bull and the unconscious drug dealer as if they were nothing more than dead weight and casually tossed them onto one of the carts. He wasn't the least bit worried about them escaping. It was impossible under his watch. Mine and the others followed behind, but even Saru and Kiron weren't entirely sure what Blaine's intentions were. What was he planning with all of this? Oh, right. If you have masks, wear them. Or keep your distance from me unless you want your identities exposed. I don't really care either way. Blaine suddenly reminded Mine and Sheil. In that case, we'll stay back and observe. Sheil said, pulling up the hood of her cloak. Fine. Mine muttered, following suit. Blaine then made his way toward a bustling night market. At this hour, the place was packed with people. Up ahead, there was a stage where a group of dancers was performing. Excuse me, I need to borrow this venue. Blaine said, tossing a bag of gold coins to the stage manager, a man in a top hat. The manager looked momentarily stunned, but when he opened the bag and saw its contents, his eyes widened in shock. It was a small bag, but it was filled with gold coins, not copper or silver, but pure gold. No problem. No problem at all. Please, do as you like. The stage manager said eagerly, bowing with utmost respect. He then shot a glance at the dancers, signaling for them to clear the stage immediately. Meanwhile, the gathered audience was left utterly confused. What was going on? Was this some kind of impromptu performance? Chapter 107, Public Execution. The spread of Akatsuki. After the trailer was hauled onto the stage, Blaine grabbed Bull and the drug dealer, dragging them down. The drug dealer seemed to have regained consciousness, letting out a weak groan. Blaine placed a hand on each of their shoulders, forcing them to kneel before the crowd of commoners below. For Bull, this was a deep humiliation, forcing a high-ranking official like him to kneel before a group of so-called lowly peasants. But he had no choice. If he dared to resist, Blaine would not hesitate to kill him on the spot. Meanwhile, Mine and Sheil watched from within the crowd, keeping an eye on the stage. Saru and Kiron stood behind Blaine. By now, they had a good idea of what he was about to do. Since Blaine hadn't spoken yet, the crowd remained confused. What's going on? We came here to watch a dance performance. Even if this is some kind of act, it's a bit much, isn't it? Why does that blood-covered guy look kinda like Lord Bull? Lord Bull? I've heard of him, but I've never seen someone of his status in person. No way. It really is him. And those three on stage look like assassins. This isn't a performance, is it? More and more people began to suspect the bloodied man in a suit was indeed Lord Bull. The situation was quickly becoming serious. At that moment, Blaine grabbed Bull by the hair, lifting his face for everyone to see. I'm sure plenty of you recognize this man. His name is Bull. He's deeply involved with drug smugglers and has committed countless atrocities. I'm sure many of you have suffered under him, too afraid to speak out." Blaine then gestured to the man beside Bull. "And this one here? He's a drug dealer who worked with him. Together, they smuggled enormous amounts of narcotics, destroying countless families." A heavy silence fell over the crowd. They were stunned. The once powerful Lord Bull, now kneeling before them, bloodied and beaten. It was almost too surreal to believe. The stage manager, who had allowed Blaine to rent the venue, was now beginning to panic. Was this man really about to do something horrifying on his stage? Blaine turned to Bull, his voice cold and sharp. "Tell them yourself, have you been colluding with drug dealers? And not just one, but multiple?" "Yes. Yes." Bull whimpered, reduced to a pathetic, broken man. He had no more strength to resist. Blaine's voice remained calm. "Good. The justice you never got, I'll deliver for you." With those words, Blaine activated his will, donning the tiger skin mask once more. The crimson night blade materialized in his hand. And with a single, swift motion he beheaded both Bull and the drug dealer in front of the entire crowd. Bull's severed head hit the ground with little reaction in his lifeless eyes. He had already accepted his fate. The drug dealer, on the other hand, had barely been conscious before his death. He likely never even realized he had died. The audience fell into absolute silence. Even the sound of their heads rolling off the stage echoed harshly in the dead air. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Lord Bull. Just like that. He's dead. The wagons behind me contain all of Bull's possessions. You can divide them among yourselves, but don't get too greedy. Blaine deliberately emphasized the last part, don't get too greedy. Only then did the crowd erupt into cheers. They had long despised Lord Bull. Pah. Why even call him that now? Dead man suits him better. But before this, they wouldn't have dared to oppose him one wrong move, and it would have been their heads on the chopping block. Now, the hero standing on the platform had taken care of their problem. And on top of that, he was handing out money. Even a single gold coin was enough for them to splurge for a while. Blaine then turned to the servants who had just emerged from Bull's mansion. "Sort these gold coins into small bags, 10 per bag. Make sure to include these flyers before handing them out," he instructed. "And take 2 or 3 bags for yourselves as payment for your help." The servants eagerly nodded in gratitude. As the gold bags were distributed, news spread like wildfire. Word quickly reached the entire night market, and people rushed over in a frenzy, eager to get their share. Even those who were already in bed or fast asleep bolted out of their homes to grab the gold. With Bull's fortune, tens of thousands of coins could be handed out, so it wouldn't run out anytime soon. Blaine had also prepared for the aftermath. He had the servants wear masks from nearby street vendors to prevent retaliation and assured them he would protect them for the time being. As the gold coins spread, so did the flyers along with the name of the Akatsuki organization. The back of the flyer even detailed Akatsuki's ideology. Blaine felt that this was enough. When he saw the Imperial Capital Security Force approaching through his Mangekyo Sharingan, he quickly signaled the servants to slip away with the crowd. By then, most of the gold had already been taken. Only a small amount remained, but Blaine didn't care, someone would take the rest soon enough. By the time the security force arrived, they were met with nothing but chaos and a few scattered coins. "What the hell is going on here? Move it!" The leading guard barked at the disorderly crowd. Once the people dispersed, the shameless guards helped themselves to the remaining gold bags. As for the assassin who killed Lord Bull, he had long since escaped, and they couldn't be bothered to chase him. Only after looting the last of the gold did they put on a show of handling Lord Bull's body. Meanwhile, Blaine and the others had already left the Imperial capital. "I heard your base is pretty far. Why don't you stay at our place for the night?" As they stepped out of the city, Shield extended an invitation to Blaine, Sero, and Kuram. "It is quite late." Mine looked up at the dark sky, where only a faint moonlight illuminated the land. "That works." Blaine nodded slightly. He also wanted Sero to properly meet the members of Night Trade. Sero and Kuram had no objections. Sero still remembered her master's word she should judge Night Trade objectively. Shield and Mine, the two she had just met, didn't seem like bad people. But what about the rest of Night Trade? Chapter 108, owing as death a favor, Blaine found a nearby flying danger beast mount and took Shield and Mine with him to the Night Trade base. At first, nothing seemed unusual until Kuram, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, sat down on Blaine's lap. Mine's eyes widened in shock. "What are you two doing?" Kuram, still calmly munching on a cookie, looked completely unfazed. "What's wrong?" "And nothing." Seeing Kuram act as if nothing was out of the ordinary, Mine immediately deflated. Then, just like before, Sero sat behind Blaine, pressing close to him. "You all seem to get along pretty well," Shield remarked in her usual absent-minded way. "Yeah. Mine pursed her lips slightly, looking somewhat displeased. Before long, Blaine and the others arrived at the night raid base on the Flying Danger Beast. She'll briefly explained what had happened to the rest of Night Raid. I can't believe it. That just so happens to be the same target as our latest mission. Najunda said, surprised. Unlike Night Raid, Blaine hadn't taken on an assassination contract or received any reward. He had simply acted on his own to eliminate Bull and the drug smuggling merchants. Of course, it wasn't a completely selfless act. This operation had effectively spread the name of Akatsuki. Nei-san. Even though they had just seen each other not long ago, Kiram was just as excited to reunite with Akame. The two sisters immediately embraced. For Sero, this was her first time meeting the members of Night Raid, but she showed no hesitation. Instead, she introduced herself with ease. I'm Sero from the Akatsuki organization. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Hello, Sero. You're more than welcome to visit Night Raid. Najunda said warmly. So far, the Akatsuki members she had encountered including Blaine had all treated Night Raid amicably, and their goals currently aligned. So, do you remember me? Chelsea greeted her with a playful grin. Sero looked at her in confusion. Have we met before? I don't remember. As far as she could recall, she had no memory of the girl standing in front of her. Just a second, Chelsea activated her Tegu Gia Foundation, instantly transforming into a familiar small black cat. She let out a soft meow. As if to say, do you recognize me now? Shady. Sero's eyes lit up in realization. She had worried about Shady for 2 whole days after the little cat had suddenly disappeared. Never in her wildest dreams did she imagine that Shady had actually been this girl all along. Chelsea leaped onto Sero's shoulder and affectionately licked her face with her rough cat tongue. Ha ha, that tickles. A moment later, Chelsea reverted to her human form. Watching Sero and Chelsea hit it off so quickly, Blaine felt reassured. It seemed likely that Sero would get along just fine with the rest of Night Raid. After all, she wasn't inherently bad, just easily influenced. As long as she didn't stubbornly insist that Night Raid was evil, there shouldn't be any major issues. Another cute girl joins the party. Is this your pet? Lubbock asked as he looked at Koro, the small creature standing at Sero's feet. Just as he was about to crouch down and play with it, Mine quickly warned him, I'd think twice if I were you. That's not just some ordinary pet, it's a biological Tegu. Mess with it, and it might just eat you. Eh? Lubbock immediately recoiled in alarm. This little thing was a biological Tegu? Don't worry, Koro isn't a threat to good people. Sero said with a cheerful smile. Good people? I wouldn't go that far. Lubbock said awkwardly. To be honest, none of us here can really call ourselves good people. Leon added with a carefree laugh. No one in Night Raid considered themselves righteous. That must be the legendary magical beast transformation, Hecatonkairs. Right? Najunda speculated. As a former Imperial general, she knew this Tegu was still in the Empire's hands. Though she had never seen it in person, she was familiar with its description and could recognize it from that alone. That's right. But since Koro is so friendly toward you, I know you're all on the side of justice. Sero declared with confidence. Blaine flicked her forehead lightly. Haven't I told you before? Stop bringing up justice and evil all the time. Ugh. I understand, Master. Sero pouted but obediently nodded. By the way, Blaine, I assume you've already heard about Esdeath's return? Najunda suddenly brought up the topic, her tone serious. This was the biggest concern weighing on her mind today. Esdeath had conquered the northern tribes far faster than anyone expected. In less than 2 weeks including travel time she had utterly crushed them. The battles themselves likely took no more than 3 days. Her overwhelming speed had caught the revolutionary army completely off guard. They had planned to make major moves while Esdeath was away from the capital, but now, those plans had completely fallen apart. No doubt about it, Esdeath truly was the Empire's strongest. I know. Blaine replied calmly. Rumor has it that Prime Minister Honest summoned Esdeath back on short notice. Most likely, they're preparing to move against us. Najunda said gravely. You've said before that you could take on Esdeath alone. It's not that I doubt you, but just to be safe, I'd rather we face her together and proceed cautiously. No one knows the full extent of her power. Back when she led her forces in defecting from the Empire, Esdeath's interception had left a deep mark on Najunda, perhaps even a lingering trauma. The atmosphere was tense, and even Mine, who usually took any chance to bicker with Blaine, remained silent. The smartest course of action was undeniably to unite against Esdeath. I understand. Cooperation isn't an issue. Blaine replied smoothly. However, there were some matters he still preferred to handle himself. For instance, he had always felt that he owed Esdeath a favor. Thinking back, she had looked after him multiple times since he arrived in the Imperial capital. Without her, things wouldn't have gone nearly as smoothly for him. So once Asdith returned, Blaine intended to settle that debt on his own. Chapter 109, A subordinate wants to fall in love. Alright, then there shouldn't be any issues. Najunda said. For now, let's wait and see what Honest and Asdith do next, then adjust our plans accordingly. When it came to Asdith, she wasn't willing to take any risks. Her approach was cautious and measured. However, Blaine clearly had no intention of just sitting back and watching. That said, he wasn't arrogant enough to completely dismiss Asdith as a threat. Oh, right, I remember Asdith had a pretty good impression of you. She even wanted you to be her second in command. Chelsea suddenly remarked. So you and that woman were on such good terms? Najunda said, a little surprised. Then again, it wasn't all that shocking. From what she knew, Asdith had a keen eye for talent and treated her subordinates well aside from her hellish training regimen. That did happen, but there's no way I'd agree to it now. Blaine stated firmly. Now that he had founded Akatsuki, joining the enemy was out of the question. Asdith was undoubtedly aligned with Prime Minister Honest's faction. Unless he somehow defeated her and she willingly submitted to him, there was no possibility of them being on the same side. But that was something to consider later. Or, I could just disguise myself as you, get close to Asdith, and then... Chelsea made a slashing motion across her neck. It's best not to be reckless. Najunda warned. Asdith isn't someone you can assassinate so easily. If you fail, escaping will be nearly impossible. Fair point. Chelsea chuckled. She was never one to act impulsively. Even if she did go through with the plan, she'd retreat the moment she sensed it wasn't the right time to strike. That was how she always operated. Even in the original timeline, Chelsea only took action when she was absolutely sure, which made her assassination success rate incredibly high. And even if she did fail, she was skilled enough to escape unscathed. The only time things went wrong was with Kurum. She hadn't expected Kurum to have been strengthened by drugs, turning her into something far beyond a normal human. If it had been anyone else, they would have died instantly. But instead, Chelsea. It was getting late. After some casual conversation mostly helping Sarah get acquainted with the rest of Night Trade, everyone retired to their rooms. Kurum, as usual, wanted to sleep with her sister. They prepared an unused bedroom for Sarah, while Blaine naturally returned to the room he had stayed in before. And just like last time, Chelsea casually walked into his room, pillow in hand, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You again? If someone saw this, they'd think I stole your room. Blaine sighed. What, am I not allowed? Chelsea teased, sticking out her tongue. But seriously, if this is just you messing with me, isn't this going a little too far? There's no need to take the joke this far. Blaine's tone was serious. He had a strong feeling Chelsea was only doing this to toy with him after all. Her scheming nature was something he had long since accepted as fact. He'd be lying if he said he hadn't occasionally wondered if she actually liked him. But considering how mischievous she was, he wasn't about to assume anything. If he was wrong, he'd only end up making a fool of himself. And Chelsea would never let him live it down. Rather than risk that, it was safer to expect nothing at all. Hearing Blaine speak so seriously, Chelsea's smile froze for a moment. Then, she asked, do you really think I'm just messing with you? Yeah, what else would it be? Blaine stated his honest thoughts. Seeing the slightly complicated look on Chelsea's face, he suddenly wondered could she actually have feelings for him. However, in the very next moment, Chelsea's expression shifted into a mischievous smirk. What a shame. So you saw right through me. I really thought you'd turn bright red after just a little teasing, you innocent little chick. With that, Chelsea flopped backward onto the bed. Good night, I'm already getting sleepy. She slipped under the covers, her voice lively as she bid Blaine good night, without showing any hint of awkwardness. But in reality, she was a little annoyed. She had gone this far, yet this guy still thought she was just playing around. Then again, she had to admit she did have a habit of being a bit manipulative at times. It was only natural that Blaine had came to see her this way. Was this her own fault? Or was he just that dense? Chelsea decided not to dwell on it. Her instincts told her that if she ever outright confessed, Blaine wouldn't be able to handle it. But she wasn't in the mood right now. She could wait. There was no rush. Mine wasn't a threat, but Kurum. Now she might be someone to keep an eye on. Today, Asdith and the three beasts returned to the imperial capital from the northern frontier. The streets were filled with crowds cheering for General Asdith. She nodded slightly to acknowledge them but continued walking straight toward the palace. Upon reaching the throne room, Asdith entered alone while the three beasts remained outside. She stepped forward and knelt on one knee before the young emperor. She still observed proper etiquette and saw no shame in doing so. General Asdith, your suppression of the northern tribes was remarkable. In recognition of your bravery, I have prepared a reward of 10,000 taels of gold. The young emperor announced from his throne. Thank you for your generosity, Your Majesty. I will distribute the reward among the soldiers stationed at the northern border. They will surely be grateful for your kindness. Asdith had no personal interest in wealth. She had always handed over her rewards in full to her subordinates. It kept morale high and made her army all the more formidable. Although you've just returned from the front lines, I have an urgent mission for you. The Emperor continued. Recently, a ruthless group calling themselves Nitrate has been wreaking havoc in the capital. I want you to crush them with force, wipe them out completely. I obey, but I have 2 requests. What are they? Speak freely. My lord. I want to experience love. Asdith's gaze was sharp and intense, her aura carrying the weight of a battlefield declaration. Chapter 110, The love interest is Blaine. As long as the requests weren't too unreasonable, the young Emperor and Prime Minister Honest would do their best to fulfill General Asdith's wishes. But they never expected her request to be something as shocking as wanting to fall in love. This wasn't just anyone, it was Asdith, the battle-crazed warlord who had no interest in anything beyond combat and crushing her enemies. Hearing the word love come from Asdith's mouth left Honest completely stunned. The young Emperor, on the other hand, wasn't as shocked. He was still quite naive about such matters after all. How old was he? Oh. The Emperor took a moment to process it, then suddenly clapped his hands in realization and said with a half-understanding nod, I see. The general is at a prime age but still single. Doesn't the general have countless admirers? Honest asked. They're just pets. Asdith spoke dismissively, making it clear she had no interest in any of them. To her, they weren't even worth considering as humans. Well. Honest had to admit she had a point. There was no way someone like Asdith would be interested in those men. In that case, let me recommend someone for the general. How about the Prime Minister? He's a fine man. The young Emperor, in all seriousness, suggested Honest himself. What? Your Majesty. Honest's face twisted in shock. He knew himself well enough to understand that he was far from Asdith's type. And in any case, he had no interest in romance. His passions lay in power, food, and pleasure. He had even spent years training at the Imperial Fist Temple in his youth just to ensure his body remained healthy enough to enjoy indulgences in his later years. I appreciate the thought, but the Prime Minister has high blood pressure. Who knows when he might suddenly drop dead? Asdith spoke in a polite yet cutting manner. She didn't outright show any disgust, but her words were dismissive enough. How rude. I'm in perfect health. Honest retorted. Then, does General Asdith already have someone in mind? Honest asked, speaking through a mouthful of food. Yes. Asdith nodded. Oh? And who might that be? Honest grew curious. What kind of man could possibly catch Asdith's interest? It's Blaine, the one I introduced earlier. I want him as my second in command and I want to have a relationship with him. Asdith stated it plainly. Blaine. Honest didn't react at first. But the moment he processed what she had just said, his eyes widened in horror. Wait, what? You mean Blaine? Yes. Asdith frowned slightly, puzzled by his reaction. Honest suddenly felt like he was doomed. Because unless something had gone terribly wrong, Blaine should have already been eliminated by Skiulu's subordinates. Of all the people Asdith could have taken an interest in, why did it have to be him? He had confidently assured Skiulu that there wouldn't be any issues yet now. If Asdith found out that Blaine was dead, she would undoubtedly fly into a rage. If worst came to worst, he might have no choice but to throw Skiulu under the bus. Between the two, Asdith was far more important to him. If she were gone, then the only remaining major force in the Empire would be Great General Do, who leaned toward the Conscience faction. That would spell disaster for Honest's grip on power. There is something very unfortunate I must inform the general about. Blaine has. Honest deliberately emphasized his words. I heard that Blaine repeatedly disobeyed Skiulu's orders, and Skiulu held a grudge against him. So he had Blaine executed in secret. With this, he completely distanced himself from Skiulu. If Asdith sought revenge for Blaine, the one to die would be Skiulu, not him. Asdith's expression shifted slightly, but her voice remained calm. What you're saying is, Blaine is dead? Yes. General Asdith can have as many men as she desires, but Blaine is indeed. Honest's tone wavered with guilt. I understand. May I handle this matter myself? Asdith's expression remained unreadable. Of course. The general may do as she pleases. Honest responded immediately. Hearing Asdith's words, he had a bad feeling something serious was about to happen. He wasted no time in trying to stay in her good graces. Then I will conduct a full investigation. Asdith spoke calmly. She didn't believe that Blaine had died so easily. She had witnessed his incredible abilities firsthand. His survival skills were far beyond ordinary. And if she wanted to confirm whether he was truly dead, the best method was simple: she would ask Skiulu directly. Or rather, she would interrogate him. No matter what, Blaine belonged to her. Even if he had committed some mistake, only she had the right to punish him. She would make sure Skiu understood that very clearly. Apart from love, I have another request. Your Majesty wanted me to eliminate night trade by force, correct? Asdith, regaining her composure, shifted back to business. It is said that nearly all of night trade's members are Tegu users. I believe the best way to counter them is with Tegu users of our own. Therefore, I request Your Majesty to gather 6 Tegu users and form a special task force composed purely of Tegu users. Upon hearing Asdith's request, the young emperor asked, but don't you already have the 3 beasts? They're all Tegu users, right? Do you really need 6 more? Tegus weren't mere playthings. Every Tegu user in the empire was a valuable asset. Asking for 6 more all at once was not a decision to be taken lightly. Your Majesty. Honest immediately stepped in. You can entrust this power to General Asdith without worry. If there is anyone who can handle it, it's her. Well, if the Prime Minister says so, then I am reassured. But can we really gather that many Tegu users? The young emperor had absolute trust in Honest. Whatever the Prime Minister said, he believed, which was precisely why he was seen as a puppet ruler by outsiders. There won't be any problem. Asdith intended to personally select the Tegu users, just as she had done with the 3 beasts. But for now, her priority was Blaine. At that moment, as she lowered her head, the icy glint in her eyes flashed with an unmistakable, bone-chilling killing intent. Chapter 111, Reunion with Asdith. With General Asdith here, the imperial capital will remain as steady as a mountain. That puts my mind at ease. The young emperor let out a sigh of relief. He had always believed that as long as he followed Prime Minister Honest's advice, he could safeguard the empire built by his predecessors. His intention had always been to govern properly, but little did he realize that this approach would only plunge the empire further into darkness until the entire structure inevitably collapsed. General Asdith is truly a loyal subject. Honest chimed in, echoing the sentiment. But what truly reassured him wasn't Asdith's loyalty, it was the matter of Blaine. He had successfully shifted all the blame onto Skiu, which meant there shouldn't be any further complications. At worst, they would sacrifice Skiu. The Tegu, the complete book of the world, could always be handed over to someone else, no great loss. But Asdith was different. A powerhouse like her, who had no interest in politics or power, was the ideal ally. Even when the emperor had attempted to reward her with noble titles or land, she had refused without hesitation. Unlike great General Do, who also adhered to the ancestral tradition of avoiding politics, Honest saw Do as a potential threat, someone he feared would eventually turn against him. Asdith, however, was his trump card against Do. And her strength was irreplaceable. No one besides Asdith had ever been able to withstand the full power of the demon's extract. Those who had attempted even a single sip had all failed. In the end, Skiu was nothing more than a discarded pawn. After leaving the palace, Asdith spoke with Prime Minister Honest for a while. I regret that I wasn't able to stop Skiu in time regarding the matter of Blaine. Honest continued to emphasize his supposed regret. He was desperate to distance himself from Skiu entirely. Not that he was worried about what Skiu might say to Asdith as long as he denied everything. There was no way Asdith would take Skiu's words at face value. Even now, Honest still felt uneasy. He had never imagined that Asdith's interest in Blaine had reached the point where she wanted him as a lover. If he had known, he would never have allowed Skiu to lay a finger on Blaine. Asdith may not have shown any outward anger, but knowing her as well as he did, he could only imagine how miserable Skiu's fate would be. It doesn't matter. I will personally investigate this matter thoroughly. Asdith's voice was calm and detached. Do as you wish. Honest nodded before suddenly changing the topic. But really, I find it quite unbelievable. I never thought you'd take an interest in anything beyond battle and slaughter. When I heard you say those things earlier, I was truly shocked. Yes. Asdith sighed. Even I don't fully understand why. Why I suddenly started thinking about love. From a biological perspective, it's perfectly natural to seek out the opposite sex. You probably just realized it a little later than most. Honest said. That being said, he still felt that Asdith and the idea of love simply didn't belong in the same sentence. I see. So this is just an instinctual drive, like that of a beast? Asdith nodded slightly, her interpretation as blunt as ever. By the way, requesting 6 Tegu users all at once is barely within the realm of possibility. Finding people for you won't be easy. Honest suddenly flashed a sly grin. As a condition. I'd like a few people to disappear from this world permanently. Resorting to schemes again? You really do whatever you please, Prime Minister. Asdith let out a cold chuckle, clearly accepting his terms. I'll leave it to the 3 beasts. As for herself, she had more pressing matters to attend to. Outside the royal palace, the 3 beasts had been waiting for some time. As soon as Asdith arrived, they knelt on one knee before her. I have a new mission for you. Asdith said coolly, but it's different from your previous assignments. She then relayed the details to them. Not long after Asdith returned to the imperial capital, Blaine received word of it. The Akatsuki organization had informants stationed in the capital, and in recent days, their sole focus had been tracking Asdith's movements. As soon as they spotted her and the three beasts on the streets, they immediately reported back to Blaine. Upon hearing that Asdith had returned, Blaine set out for the imperial capital alone. This time, he didn't inform Kiromorsaru, not wanting to cause them unnecessary worry. Using Kamui, he teleported directly from his room to the capital. However, he wasn't sure where exactly Asdith was at the moment, only that she had gone straight to the royal palace upon her return. So, he decided to check the area around the palace first. That would give him the best chance of finding her. Today, he neither wore a mask nor the Akatsuki's red cloud cloak. Instead, he dressed in casual clothes. But the moment he arrived near the palace, he felt it again: someone was tailing him. His first thought was that it had to be Skiyuu's men. Ever since he took the Empire's assassination unit, Skiyuu had likely been searching for him all over the city. A high-security area like the royal palace made it even easier for him to be discovered. There was no helping it. Blaine decided to pretend he hadn't noticed them and focus on finding Asdith first. Unless, of course, his pursuers lost patience and attacked him, at which point, he'd have no choice but to return the favor. Unfortunately for them, their patience was lacking. Before long, they surrounded him from all directions, clearly preparing to take him down. Blaine stopped in his tracks and spoke flatly. "Since you're so eager, why not just come out already?" He needed to finish this quickly and continue his search for Asdith. At his words, several dark figures emerged from the shadows. A glance was enough to tell they were assassins. "You brat, after offending Lord Skiyuu, you still dare to roam around near the palace? You clearly don't take us seriously." One of the masked men sneered coldly. "Enough with the chatter. Just attack all at once, I'm in a hurry." Blaine's tone remained indifferent. "You're asking for death." His words immediately enraged the assassins, and they charged at him with murderous intent. Few people passed near the palace, and those who were on the street quickly fled, afraid of getting caught in the battle. Just as Blaine prepared to take them all out in one swift strike, something unexpected happened. A sharp icicle shot past his ear at high speed, piercing straight through the body of the nearest assassin. Blaine's pupil shrank in surprise. He turned his head and there she was. Asdith had appeared behind him, without him even realizing when. Chapter 112, Asdith's Confession. The tall and proud figure stood there, radiating an overwhelming presence. As Asdith locked eyes with Blaine, her usually cold and commanding expression softened as if centuries of ice had melted away. A rare look of emotion surfaced on her face, and the faint blush on her cheeks made her appear strikingly alluring. Blaine was caught off guard. He hadn't expected Asdith to show up so suddenly. Meanwhile, the remaining black-clad assassins, stunned by their comrades' abrupt demise, froze in place. When they finally registered Asdith standing behind Blaine, their faces turned pale. "General Asdith?" Their shocked voices rang out, unable to comprehend why she was attacking them. But their outcry only seemed to bring Asdith back to her senses and hastened their deaths. She wasted no words. With a sharp stomp of her high boots, jagged ice spikes erupted from the ground, shooting toward the assassins at an alarming speed. Some were too slow to react and were instantly impaled from below, their bodies skewered in an instant. The ones who managed to dodge had no time to process their anger or confusion. They could only scramble away in panic. But before they could even catch their breath, Asdith was already upon them. The two nearest assassins were instantly frozen solid with a mere gesture. Without hesitation, Asdith summoned a massive ice sphere in midair and sent it crashing down on another assassin, crushing him into a bloody mess. Only one remained. He dropped to his knees in despair, his face drained of color. The power gap between them and Asdith was simply insurmountable. Yet, more than the fear of death, what haunted him was the question: why was General Asdith slaughtering them? Why? Because he is mine. Asdith's voice was cold, yet carried an undeniable authority. The last assassin froze for a moment before suddenly understanding. At least now, he knew the reason for his death. The next second, Asdith delivered a brutal kick to his head, snapping his neck on the spot. Without sparing a glance at the fallen bodies, she turned and walked straight toward Blaine. Then, without waiting for his reaction, she wrapped her arms around him. Asdith wasn't much shorter than Blaine. With her natural height of 170 centimeters and the added lift from her high boots, she was nearly eye level with him, making the embrace effortless. Blaine was taken aback. Asdith had simply hugged him out of nowhere. "I knew it. You wouldn't die so easily at someone else's hands." Blaine could hear the concern in her voice. "Where did you hear that I was dead?" he asked. "The Prime Minister. He claimed that Skiyuu had you executed." Asdith replied. I see. Blaine found it odd. Skiyu should have known long ago that he had killed those ego users, Shin users, and the accompanying soldiers, so why was Honest still unaware? At that moment, as Death finally released him, Blaine then noticed something unusual. Her face was growing redder by the second. And her smile. How should he even describe it? For the first time, he found himself at a loss for words. Let's go. Before Blaine could even ask, Asdeath grabbed his hand and started leading him away. Where are you taking me? Blaine asked. Do you even need to ask? To my place, of course. Asdeath spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She didn't bother asking for his opinion, she simply treated him as her romantic partner, as if it were already decided. Wait. Blaine stopped in his tracks, his tone serious. I came here because I need to talk to you. Thinking he had something important to say, Asdeath patiently listened. There's something I need to make clear. About your previous proposal to make me your lieutenant, my answer is no. I cannot serve you. Blaine decided to be straightforward. That said, you've helped me a lot. While I can't pledge my service to you, I can still repay the favor in any way I can. Hearing this, Asdeath smiled. I see. So that's what this is about. She seemed unconcerned. It's fine if you don't want to serve me. But since you mentioned repaying the favor. She paused for a moment before continuing, then I want you to be my lover. Blaine blinked. What? Asdeath, however, wasn't joking. In her mind, she never believed Blaine actually owed her anything. After all, he had saved her first, and what she had done in return was simply balancing the scales. But since he insisted on repaying a debt, she decided to take the opportunity to make her own request. Her tone wasn't one of negotiation. It was a statement, a command. Even if Blaine refused, she fully intended to make him accept, so there was no point in asking. Okay. Blaine responded instinctively, then immediately realized what he had just agreed to. Wait, hold on, you said lover? Yes. Asdeath nodded confidently. Her sudden confession left Blaine's mind reeling. This was too abrupt. The last time they had met, Asdeath hadn't been like this at all. Give me a second, I need to think this through. Blaine took a moment to gather his thoughts before cautiously asking, you mean pretending to be lovers, right? He figured that was the more logical explanation. Maybe Asdeath needed him to play along for some reason. No. Asdeath immediately dismissed the idea. I like you. That's why I want us to be together. I have no interest in something as childish as pretending. Her voice was unwavering, her expression filled with certainty. There was no trace of embarrassment, only a confident smile as she laid her feelings bare. Blaine's mind went blank for a moment. Then, snapping back to reality, he quickly held up a hand. All right, I get it. But give me a moment, I need to process this. Asdeath waited patiently, still smiling. She was only this understanding when it came to Blaine. Anyone else who dared hesitate before obeying her would have long since been thrown into a torture chamber. Blaine couldn't believe what was happening. Asdeath's confession had been so direct, so forceful, so sudden. And the way she looked at him. There was no hint of deception. The blush on her face, the joy in her smile, it was all genuine. Her feelings were clear as day. But there was one major problem. They were on opposite sides. Chapter 113, Date. The Akatsuki organization and Night Raid were both committed to overthrowing Honest's regime, and Asdeath was its strongest pillar of support. Blaine had already considered that if he could personally defeat Asdeath, he might be able to turn her from an enemy into an ally. But for now, that wasn't the priority. He had a favor to repay first. Blaine quickly calmed himself. I understand your feelings, but I have my own circumstances. At best, I can only be your lover for a short time. Blaine spoke honestly. A short-term relationship? That's fine. Asdeath accepted it without hesitation. After all, in her mind, once he was hers, he wouldn't be going anywhere. That works, then. Blaine hadn't expected her to be so easygoing about it. So, Asdeath had just started speaking when something suddenly came to mind. Her expression changed in an instant from that of a smitten woman to an icy commander. I just remembered something that still needs to be dealt with. You're coming with me, Blaine. She was thinking about Skiyu. Even if Blaine was alive and well, she couldn't tolerate anyone daring to lay a hand on her man. What is it? Blaine asked, confused. Didn't Skiyu try to have you killed? I want to get to the bottom of this. Her tone softened noticeably when speaking to Blaine. But even now, he couldn't be certain of where Asdeath truly stood. Would she side with Skiyu? Or with him? Just because she had confessed her feelings so openly didn't necessarily mean she would support him unconditionally. Asdeath's actions were becoming more and more unpredictable. Regardless, this was a perfect opportunity for him to settle the score with Skiyu. Even if Asdeath tried to stop him, he would make sure Skiyu paid dearly. Asdeath led Blaine directly to Skiyu's mansion. The gate guards, upon seeing General Esdeath, immediately allowed her entry without hesitation. None of them even noticed the young man walking beside her. Just like that, Blaine and Esdeath entered the mansion effortlessly. Why is General Esdeath suddenly visiting today? Didn't she just return from the northern border? Yeah, I heard she effortlessly crushed a 400,000 strong army of northern tribes and slaughtered hundreds of thousands. By the way, doesn't that young man next to her seem familiar? Did you guys notice? There's nothing to notice. If he's walking beside General Esdeath, there's no way he's a problem. The guards continued their idle chatter, completely oblivious to the fact that they had just let in the two people they absolutely should not have. Esdeath ignored everyone else and headed straight for Skiulu's location. At that moment, Skiulu was in his study, poring over the map within Atigu, the complete book of the world. When he heard two sets of footsteps approaching, he didn't think much of it until the door to his study was suddenly blasted open by a chunk of ice Esdeath had casually conjured. What, who's there? The loud crash startled Skiulu, who had been deeply focused on studying the map. Tell me exactly what happened between you and Blaine. Esdeath's voice was as cold as ice. The sudden turn of events left Skiulu momentarily frozen. Seeing both Esdeath and Blaine standing before him, it took him a moment to process the situation. So, Blaine must have learned that General Esdeath had returned and gone to her with complaints. That's why this was happening, right? Skiulu felt certain that was the case. Thinking he had already figured everything out, he immediately turned to Esdeath and began denouncing Blaine. General Esdeath. Blaine. Skiulu rattled off a list of supposed crimes, though in reality, all Blaine had done was defy his cruel and inhumane orders. Halfway through, Esdeath's patience wore thin. That's enough. I get the gist. Her cold interruption made Skiulu clamp his mouth shut, though inwardly, he smirked. Blaine's crimes were backed by undeniable evidence. This kid thought he could use Esdeath to turn things around? Naive. However, the next moment, something happened that Skiulu never expected. Without hesitation, Esdeath pressed the tip of her sword against his forehead. Cold sweat immediately broke out across his face. He barely dared to breathe as he spoke in a careful tone. General Esdeath. I swear, everything I said was the truth. The sweat on his forehead only continued to build. He didn't dare move an inch. I know you're telling the truth. Esdeath's gaze was ice cold. That's exactly why I think you're trash. To her, Skiulu's policies over the Empire's assassination unit were nothing more than foolish nonsense. She didn't see Blaine's actions as anything remotely wrong. And on top of that, just for something this ridiculous, you had the audacity to lay a hand on my man. The moment those words left her lips, Esdeath stepped forward and drove her sword straight through Skiulu's forehead, freezing his entire body solid. The look of terror he wore in his final moments remained frozen in the ice, permanently etched onto his face. Well, that's taken care of. With that, Esdeath turned to Blaine, slipped her arm around his, and wearing a soft, almost girlish expression said, let's continue our date. The word date was something she had only learned from Liver, one of the three beasts. Otherwise, she wouldn't have even known what the term meant. Of course, there was still one small issue: she had no idea what people actually did on dates. So, she figured they would just do whatever she wanted. With a blissful expression, Esdeath clung to Blaine's arm and left Skiulu's mansion. The guards, completely unaware of their lord's fate, were left utterly speechless. Watching General Esdeath act so affectionate toward the young man beside her, their jaws nearly hit the floor. It was only then that they truly took notice of the young man's face. Something about him seemed familiar, but as mere low-ranking guards, they had no idea that Lord Skiulu had been secretly hunting him. Besides, most of their attention was locked onto Esdeath herself. They simply couldn't believe it. The Empire's strongest warrior, the fearsome General Esdeath, was acting like a love-struck girl in front of a man? Chapter 114, Love Fighting, Killing, and You. The most Esdeath casually walked through the streets of the imperial capital, holding Blaine's arm without the slightest concern for the gazes of passers-by. Blaine had agreed to her request to repay a favor, so he had no intention of going back on his word. However, he still hadn't officially responded to Esdeath's confession. The reason he accepted being her short-term lover was purely to settle his debt. His feelings toward this unique and domineering woman were complicated. She was the embodiment of survival of the fittest, yet at the same time, he could feel the sincerity in her passion. Especially after confessing to him, she had gone on to crush Skiulu like an insect, something only a woman like Esdeath could do. One thing was clear: Esdeath genuinely cared about him, and there was no questioning that. But Blaine couldn't give her a proper answer just yet. They were on opposite sides of a battlefield. His plan was simple: fulfill his role as her short-term lover, repay his debt, and then have an honest conversation with her. If Esdeath was willing to stand by his side, then all would be well. If not, he would defeat her with his own hands. And given her ideology, she would likely accept it without hesitation. Members of the Akatsuki organization were always stationed throughout the imperial capital, gathering intelligence. Their priority was to monitor key figures, and as the empire's strongest general, Asdith was at the top of that list. The moment she appeared in public, several of them immediately moved to observe her. They blended in perfectly, disguising themselves as Asdith's fans and ensuring they omitted no killing intent, making them indistinguishable from ordinary civilians. But when they arrived at the scene, they were utterly stunned by what they saw. Their commander, Blaine, was walking arm in arm with Asdith, who was smiling sweetly. This was something only couples would do. When did their commander and General Asdith become lovers? Completely shaken, they quickly retreated to a discreet corner and began whispering among themselves. You all saw that, right? The commander is that close with General Asdith? When did this happen? Are they actually in a real relationship? But General Asdith is Minas Tirana's strongest general. I bet she's blackmailing the commander, damn it, that woman is despicable. No matter what's going on, let's wait and see. The commander will likely notice us. If things take a turn, we'll step in immediately. After a brief discussion, the Akatsuki members returned to the crowd, keeping a close watch on Blaine and Asdith. Worry flickered in their eyes, though they did their best to conceal it. Even so, Asdith sensed their concern, something an ordinary person wouldn't have noticed. She had long grown accustomed to being shadowed by assassins from rebel forces. However, she was too immersed in her date with Blaine to care. As long as no one interrupted them, she was content. Blaine, of course, had also noticed his subordinates in the crowd. He just hoped they wouldn't do anything reckless. To Blaine's surprise, Asdith hadn't done anything special during their so-called date. Was this really a date if all they did was stroll through the streets? Blaine had assumed Asdith would take him somewhere to eat, drink, or have fun. Just then, Asdith suddenly slowed her pace. Noticing the change in her movement, Blaine looked ahead and saw a tall, luxurious villa in front of them. We're here. Let's go in. Without hesitation, Asdith pulled Blaine toward the front door. It was clear this was her home, the lavish mansion granted to her by the young emperor. This is your house, isn't it? Blaine asked. Yes. Asdith replied. Didn't I say we were on a date? I see. Blaine was slightly puzzled. Could a date happen at home? Meanwhile, the Akatsuki organization members who had been tailing them stopped nearby when they realized this was Asdith's residence. They didn't dare follow inside, that would be far too risky. For now, they could only observe from a distance. In the courtyard, Blaine noticed a variety of plants and flowers, especially the potted ones, which seemed well cared for. So, you have an interest in gardening? He remarked. Yes, but they're not for admiration. Asdith said matter-of-factly. They're for enhancing pain when I interrogate prisoners. Figures. That's exactly your style. Blaine couldn't help but comment. Inside the living room, Asdith poured Blaine a cup of tea. She wasn't entirely sure how a date was supposed to go, but for some reason, simply sitting with Blaine and chatting over tea felt nice. Other than fighting and killing, do you seriously have no other interests or hobbies? Blaine asked, curiosity lacing his tone. That's right. I'm terrible at painting, and I don't appreciate music or any of the arts. But now, things might be a little different. As she spoke, a meaningful smile appeared on Asdith's lips. Blaine thought she had suddenly discovered a new hobby. Right now, besides fighting and killing, my hobby is you. A faint blush colored Asdith's cheeks, and her voice carried an unmistakable allure. Cough. Blaine had just taken a sip of tea when he heard her words and nearly choked, coughing a few times. There was no denying it, Asdith was bold, completely unafraid to say whatever was on her mind. And this directness suited her perfectly. The slight redness on her face wasn't from shyness, it was pure devotion. Blaine felt his own face heat up slightly but maintained his composure. To be fair, that doesn't really count as a hobby. Asdith crossed her legs and rested her chin on one hand. Oh? Then let me rephrase, my favorite things are fighting, killing. And you. Chapter 115, Love-Struck Mind. Okay, I get it. Blaine was barely holding on against Asdith's relentless assault and had no choice but to call for a timeout. But if you have any hobbies you'd recommend, I'm willing to give them a try. Asdith returned to the main topic. She was thinking long-term, having shared interests with her lover would be ideal. As for the short-term lovers Blaine had mentioned earlier, she had completely dismissed the idea. She was confident that, with her abilities, she could win him over. If charm wasn't enough, then she would use force. One way or another, Blaine was hers, and he could forget about ever escaping. My hobbies. Blaine was caught off guard and found himself lost in thought. He hadn't expected Asdith to be willing to change for him, to explore things she wouldn't normally be interested in. She was genuinely serious about being in a relationship with him. But as he thought about it, he realized he hadn't really developed any hobbies since coming to this world. Before his transmigration, he had been an average college student, decent grades, playing video games, watching anime, nothing particularly special. But in the world of Akame ga Kill, there were no games or anime. So naturally, he hadn't found much to do. I guess I like small animals. It was the only thing he could think of. Small animals, huh? Well, that's a bit. But I'll give it a try. Asdith said. To her, creatures weaker than even a level 4 danger beast were the epitome of frailty. She wasn't interested in them at all. But for Blaine, she was willing to make an exception. Actually, you don't have to force yourself. If you're not into it, there's no need to bother. Blaine said. It's fine. I'll give it a shot when I get the chance. If I really can't stand it, I can just drop it. Asdith said with a smile. Blaine was silent for a moment before finally speaking again. To be honest, I'm a little flattered. Why do you even like me? He hadn't shown any particularly outstanding strength in front of Asdith. They hadn't even spent much time together. Could it really just be because of his looks? He knew he wasn't bad looking, but it couldn't be that simple, could it? Besides, if it was about looks, Asdith was on an entirely different level. Her stunning features, incredible figure, and unrivaled strength made her the undisputed strongest in the Empire. Even from a purely romantic perspective, ignoring her ruthless and bloodthirsty nature, she was practically flawless. Considerate, affectionate, and even willing to change for him. Blaine just couldn't wrap his head around why she liked him so much. And it wasn't just a casual interest, it was. How should he put it? Obsessive? Why do I like you? Probably love at first sight. I don't think there needs to be a reason. Asdith said. Love at first sight, huh? Yeah, I guess that doesn't really need an explanation. Blaine understood that kind of thing could be unpredictable. So, what do you want to eat tonight? I've been to some great restaurants, and I can take you to one. Asdith said. It was almost evening, dinner time was approaching. I'm good with anything. Just pick something you'd recommend. Blaine replied. When it was time for dinner, Asdith took Blaine to a nearby restaurant. From the elegant decor and the well-dressed guests, it was clear that this was an upscale establishment, catering to the wealthy. Asdith seemed to be a regular here. After all, her own cooking skills were limited to survival techniques from the wilderness: grilled meat, large cauldron stews, and other simple dishes. There was no way her cooking could compare to the refined cuisine served in a specialized restaurant in the imperial capital. Lady Asdith, what an honor to have you visit us again today. The waitstaff greeted Asdith with great enthusiasm and respect. However, it didn't take long for them to recognize the young man beside her. Wait. Isn't that Lord Blaine? Back when Blaine was the captain of the Imperial Capital Security Force, he had visited this place before. But that time, it wasn't for a meal, it was to deal with a brawl. Now, seeing him here with Asdith, the waiters were understandably shocked. They also recalled that Lord Blaine was no longer the captain. Had he risen to a position on par with General Asdith? Blaine and Asdith casually found an empty seat. Instead of sitting across from him, Asdith deliberately took the seat right beside him, so close that they were practically pressed together. Order whatever you want. It's my treat. Asdith murmured in his ear. Then I won't hold back. Blaine replied. Despite his words, he only picked 2 dishes that seemed to suit his taste. With Asdith's presence, the other patrons couldn't help but take notice. Who is that guy? How is he sitting with General Asdith? And am I seeing things, or do they look close? That's the former captain of the Imperial Capital Security Force, right? Blaine, I think. I don't know whether to be envious or not. I mean, General Asdith's personality is intense. Most people wouldn't be able to handle it. Asdith and Blaine's casual interactions carried a subtle intimacy, fueling quiet gossip among the onlookers. Before long, the waiters began serving the dishes one after another. Just as Asdith had promised, the food was excellent. After a satisfying meal, the two of them strolled through the streets. Though they weren't clinging to each other as they had earlier in the day, they were still holding hands. For Asdith, it was an instinctive gesture, one that simply made her happy. Meanwhile, the members of the Akatsuki organization had been watching from the shadows all this time. The longer they observed, the stranger things seemed. Why did it look like their commander and General Asdith were just a couple in the throes of romance? Nothing about the situation seemed off. There were no signs of Blaine being tortured or abused. Could it be that their commander had actually become Asdith's lover? The boys and girls of the Akatsuki organization were left stunned. The development was so sudden that they didn't know how to react. If General Asdith really did just abduct their commander, what would happen to the Akatsuki organization? Chapter 116, Asdith's Boudoir. Although it felt wrong to think this way, they were genuinely worried that Commander Blaine would be taken away by General Asdith. After all, Even heroes struggle to resist a beautiful woman. They couldn't completely rule out the possibility. Stay calm. Let's just trust the commander. Someone spoke up, trying to steady the group. You're right. There's no way the commander would fall for that wicked woman's tricks. What a devious seduction tactic. I never expected General Esdeath to not only be a powerhouse in battle but also resort to such underhanded schemes. It seemed like they had all convinced themselves that Esdeath was deliberately using seduction to lure in Commander Blaine. After all, who would have thought that a battle-crazed warlord like Esdeath would genuinely like Blaine, let alone fall for him at first sight? Even Blaine himself hadn't considered the possibility. Once they had calmed down, they continued observing from the shadows. In truth, they were well aware that Esdeath had probably noticed them long ago, which was why they didn't dare make any reckless moves and kept a safe distance. Unless Commander Blaine found himself in immediate danger, they wouldn't act. But if that moment ever came, they would risk their lives to help him. This feeling is really nice. Esdeath suddenly remarked as they walked together. I never used to understand why people cared about things like this. It's completely different from the thrill of battle. Well, of course. Love and killing are complete opposites. Blaine replied with a slightly awkward smile. Blaine, do you feel the same way as I do? Esdeath turned to look at him. Blaine hesitated for a moment, realizing that this wasn't a question he could answer lightly. How should I put it? Since I don't really enjoy killing and don't find joy in it, I probably can't relate to your feelings in that way. He said seriously. But if we're just talking about spending time with you, it's not unpleasant. I'd say it's a rather unique feeling. That's true, but that's enough for me. Esdeath tightened her grip on Blaine's hand slightly. Blaine couldn't help but sigh internally. Even though they were technically on opposing sides, Esdeath had undeniably given him an experience he had never had before, one he never imagined he would have. However, Esdeath still didn't know that he had founded the Akatsuki organization, which meant she also didn't realize that he was her enemy. Maybe he should just come clean sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it would feel like he was toying with her feelings. As that thought crossed his mind, Blaine noticed that night had fully fallen. I think it's about time. I should head home. He said. Alright, then let's go home. Esdeath replied. But she didn't let go of his hand. Seeing this, Blaine couldn't help but point it out. If you don't let go of my hand, I can't go home. Why say it like that? Wouldn't it be better if we just went home together? Esdeath asked in return. Wait, let me confirm something first. When you say home, do you mean your home? Blaine suddenly sensed that something was off and carefully asked. Of course. Why act so distant? My home is your home now. Esdeath corrected him matter-of-factly. But what I meant was that I'm going back to my place. Blaine made sure to clarify. Perfect, I was just thinking of visiting your place too. No matter what he said, Esdeath had no intention of letting go of his hand. Blaine fell silent. There was no way he could take Esdeath to his base. He wasn't worried for himself, but the other members of the Akatsuki organization would be in danger. Besides, it was clear that Esdeath had no intention of letting him leave on his own. This might not be very convenient. He tried to deflect. My place only has one room, and the bed is really small. Then that settles it, we'll go to my place. Esdeath completely ignored the excuse, smiling as she continued holding on to Blaine's hand and leading him home. Esdeath's villa was massive, with plenty of rooms to spare. However, she had no intention of letting Blaine sleep in a separate room. Without hesitation, she led him straight to her own. Or rather, her private chambers. Blaine had already anticipated this, so he remained composed as he stepped inside. Despite being a woman's bedroom, the atmosphere depended entirely on the woman herself. Esdeath's room was simple and dominated by cool-toned whites. The large, soft bed, pillows, and quilt were all pure white, reflecting her clear preference for the color. Do you want to bathe first, or should I? Esdeath asked directly. You go ahead. Blaine replied casually. The moment the words left his mouth, Esdeath began undressing right in front of him. There wasn't a hint of hesitation in her movements, nor the slightest trace of embarrassment on her face. In mere moments, her military uniform was on the floor, leaving her in nothing but her underwear. It seemed she truly had an affinity for white, even her undergarments were the same color. Ahem. I'm still here, you know. Blaine reminded her, struggling to find the proper place to rest his gaze. What does it matter? If you want, you can just join me in the bath. Esdeath said nonchalantly. Forget I said anything. Her words were certainly tempting, but Blaine had no intention of taking her up on the offer. He still couldn't bring himself to fully respond to her feelings, and doing something like this now would be going too far. Esdeath didn't push the matter and simply headed into the bathroom. Blaine took a seat near the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the night sky while lost in thought. He was debating whether to clarify his stance with Esdeath tonight among other things. Before he knew it, Asdith had already finished her bath and stepped out. She was wearing only a white nightgown, with nothing underneath. Her flawless, porcelain skin was almost dangerously enticing. Hearing movement, Blaine snapped back to reality. The moment he turned around, his pupils shrank slightly. This was a bit too much. And yet, Asdith showed no sign of embarrassment, walking toward him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm done. Go ahead and take your turn," she said. Blaine deliberately shifted his focus elsewhere, avoiding the urge to keep looking at her. After stepping into the bathroom, he washed up, then retrieved a fresh set of identical clothes from the Kamui space before tossing his dirty ones back inside. When he walked out, he saw that Asdith was still sitting on the bed, not lying down yet, as if she had been waiting for him. Chapter 117, Going Public with a Relationship. Seeing the deepening blush on Asdith's face and the dazed, sultry look in her eyes, Blaine suddenly had a bad feeling. She wouldn't be thinking of that, would she? "What are you standing around for? You're done washing, so come to bed," Asdith said. Blaine sat down on the other side of the bed and slowly lay down. Thankfully, it seemed like he had been overthinking things. Asdith didn't do anything, she simply lay down next to him. But it didn't take long for her to start getting restless. She first turned onto her side, resting a hand on Blaine's body, then pressed her entire body against him. Originally, the bed only had one pillow, which was a bit awkward. But now, that was no longer an issue. They were sharing the same pillow, with Asdith's icy blue hair brushing against Blaine's face. "Asdith?" Blaine softly called her name, but there was no response. Listening to her slow, steady breathing, he realized that she had already fallen asleep. So, was that just part of her sleeping habits? He had planned to use this moment to make his stance clear to her, but he didn't expect her to fall asleep so quickly. Well, there was no helping it. He'd have to wait until tomorrow. Waking her now would be pointless. The night passed. Nothing happened. But Blaine still didn't sleep well. The problem was that Asdith kept shifting in her sleep, more specifically, pressing up against him in a rather problematic way. How was he supposed to get any rest like that? And to be honest, despite only spending a day with Asdith as her supposed lover, his perception of her had already changed quite a bit. To the outside world, she was ruthless and merciless. But to her lover, she was incredibly affectionate and, surprisingly, clingy. If it weren't for their opposing positions, Blaine had to admit Asdith would be the perfect partner. Which led to an important question: once she learned the truth about his real stance, how would her attitude change? Would she go from a devoted lover to a bitter enemy? Asdith woke up early, while Blaine, still groggy from his restless night, remained half asleep. However, Asdith didn't get up immediately. Instead, she lay on her side, gazing at Blaine's sleeping face with tender eyes. This must be what they meant by love makes everything look beautiful. The longer she looked, the more pleasing he seemed to her. So when Blaine finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Asdith staring right at him. "Good morning, Blaine," she said with a smile. "Morning." Now fully awake, Blaine sat up. Although his sleep quality had been poor, his enhanced physical condition ensured it wouldn't affect him much. Only then did Asdith finally get out of bed. Without any hesitation, she casually stripped off her nightgown in the middle of the room and began putting on her undergarments and military uniform. The key issue here was that she had been wearing nothing beneath that nightgown. Although Blaine deliberately averted his gaze, his peripheral vision still caught a glimpse, an unavoidable consequence of his Mangekyo Sharingan's heightened perception. Even in just a split second, he had seen everything with crystal clarity. Asdith, however, remained completely unfazed, dressing swiftly with an air of nonchalance. She wasn't trying to seduce him or anything, she simply didn't care about such things when it came to Blaine. Of course, only Blaine. "What do you want for breakfast? There are plenty of good places nearby," she asked, now clad in her signature white military uniform. "For breakfast? How about I cook? Do you have any ingredients at home?" Blaine felt there was no need to eat out when he could make something just as good if not better himself. Asdith thought for a moment. "I don't think so. I've been stationed at the northern border dealing with the tribes, and I just got back. I haven't had time to restock anything." "Then let's go out and buy some," Blaine suggested. "Sounds good." Asdith nodded, smiling. As long as she was with Blaine, even something as simple as grocery shopping felt enjoyable. At that moment, Blaine and Asdith were shopping for ingredients at a bustling market. Blaine planned to buy eggs, bread, butter, meat patties, vegetables, milk, and other essentials. A market like this, where one could find just about anything, was the perfect place to do so. While picking out fresh vegetables, the two arrived at a stall. Since Asdith was far more familiar with the market than Blaine, she had been leading him by the hand the entire way. Beside the stall owner stood a young girl with pigtails, likely his daughter. The moment she saw Blaine and Esdeath walking hand in hand, her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Daddy, look! They're a couple." The stall owner was so startled that he immediately covered his daughter's mouth. This was General Esdeath. A single misstep in front of her could cost a person their head. General Esdeath, my daughter is still young and doesn't understand proper decorum. Please, I beg your forgiveness." The man pleaded cautiously. "It's fine. She hasn't done anything wrong, and besides, she's only speaking the truth." Esdeath lifted her intertwined fingers with Blaine, her face radiating happiness. "He is the one I love." Seeing such an expression on Esdeath's face, the little girl looked as if she'd just discovered a whole new world. So this was what love was like? So magical, so full of happiness? Even General Esdeath could look like this. Meanwhile, her father, the stall owner, was utterly dumbfounded. A moment ago, he had been terrified that his daughter's loose tongue might get them into trouble. But instead, General Esdeath had just openly admitted to being in a relationship. The shock didn't stop there. The surrounding crowd, overhearing Esdeath's words, collectively froze in disbelief. As the most prominent figure in the imperial capital, perhaps even the entire empire, any move Esdeath made would capture the attention of thousands. But this was monumental. Now that she had publicly declared their relationship, Blaine could instantly feel countless eyes locking onto him. Some were filled with shock, others with confusion. And of course, there were plenty carrying envy or outright jealousy. In an instant, all kinds of gazes from every direction converged on Blaine. He couldn't help but feel a bit awkward. Good thing he wasn't some weakling who only relied on Esdeath to get by, otherwise, handling this situation would have been a nightmare. Chapter 118, Frying Eggs. When Esdeath announced her relationship with Blaine, the explosive news spread rapidly from the small market. Since Blaine himself didn't deny it, and given that it came straight from General Esdeath, outsiders were even more convinced. There was no way Blaine could insist that he and Esdeath were merely short-term lovers at a time like this. That would be inappropriate. By now, Blaine and Esdeath had already finished shopping for the necessary ingredients. As soon as they arrived home, Blaine started preparing breakfast. It was a simple meal: sandwiches, fried eggs, and hot milk. It didn't require much culinary skill, just knowing the steps. With his Mangekyo Sharingan, Blaine felt as if he had divine assistance while frying the eggs. His enhanced perception allowed him to control the heat and timing with incredible precision, making a noticeable difference from before. The fried eggs looked flawless, perfectly golden and cooked just right. Of course, appearance alone wasn't enough, the true test was in the taste. But Blaine was confident. Besides the eggs, the main dish was sandwiches. Most of the ingredients he had bought were for them. He was meticulous in his preparation, ensuring each sandwich was crafted with care. Esdeath watched from the side, captivated by the sight of Blaine cooking so seriously. "I think I've seen food like this before, but none as refined as yours," she suddenly remarked. It seemed this world had something similar to sandwiches, but they were nowhere near as sophisticated as those from Blaine's previous life, especially with his obsession with details. "Maybe it's just because I focus more on the little things," Blaine replied casually. He certainly couldn't reveal the truth about his transmigration. Once the milk was heated, breakfast was ready. Blaine took a bite of the fried egg and confirmed that it tasted just as good as it looked. Esdeath took a bite of the sandwich and was immediately impressed. "This is delicious." "What's it called?" she asked. "Sandwich," Blaine answered. "Sandwich? I've never heard of it. Did you come up with it?" Esdeath had no recollection of such a name. "No, it's not my invention. It's more like a specialty from my hometown." Blaine had no intention of taking credit for something that wasn't his. "I see. Good thing you know how to make it. Otherwise, this amazing food might have been lost forever." Esdeath recalled that, like her, everyone from Blaine's hometown was already. After breakfast, Esdeath suddenly had an important thought. She had planned to win Blaine over with her charm, but before she even had the chance to show off, she found herself falling deeper for him instead, thanks to his incredible cooking skills. While that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, she still felt she needed to do something about it. It didn't take long for her to come up with a plan. "If I take Blaine hunting for danger beasts, he'll be captivated by my prowess in battle." Esdeath was confident in this idea. She didn't consider herself skilled in many things, but if there was one thing she excelled at, it was combat. Besides, she recalled that Blaine also came from a border region where people hunted danger beasts for survival. "Blaine, I don't have any plans this afternoon. How about we go hunting for danger beasts together?" She turned to him with an invitation. However, just as Blaine was about to respond, there was a sudden knock at the door, followed by a voice. "Lady Esdeath." Hearing this, Esdeath glanced at Blaine and said, "The three beasts are back. This is a good chance for you to meet them. Come in." With Esdeath's permission, the three beasts entered the mansion. As soon as they stepped inside, They knelt on one knee before her. Lady Asdeath, the first target has been dealt with, and Liver, one of the three beasts, paused mid-sentence, glancing at Blaine as if unsure whether to continue. Asdeath noticed his hesitation and reassured him, "It's fine, go ahead. This is Blaine, the one I told you about." "Oh." Liver responded immediately before turning to Blaine. "Lord Blaine, my apologies. I didn't mean to be disrespectful." "It's fine, don't worry about it," Blaine replied in a friendly tone. Beside Liver, Nia, who was also kneeling, kept sizing Blaine up, his eyes darting over him with curiosity. If they weren't in the middle of reporting to Asdeath, he would have already started a conversation. Daidara, on the other hand, had a very different thought process. His instincts told him that this Lord Blaine was immensely strong. If he could defeat him, he'd surely gain a lot of experience points. However, that thought only lasted a moment. After all, Blaine was Asdeath's chosen one, and offending him would be the same as offending Asdeath herself, something Daidara absolutely wouldn't dare to do. At this moment, Liver continued his report. "We also scattered plenty of nitrate flyers at the scene and made sure no outsiders witnessed the process." Asdeath nodded in approval. "Good. You can rest for now, as long as all targets are dealt with within 7 days." "Understood. Thank you, Lady Asdeath," Liver said respectfully. Hearing Liver words, Blaine remained outwardly composed, his expression steady without any visible emotion. But internally, his mind was racing. What exactly had the three beasts done? Leaving nitrate flyers at the scene while ensuring there were no witnesses. His first instinct was that it definitely wasn't something good. It was obvious they were trying to frame nitrate. But that raised a bigger question: who had they eliminated that was important enough to pin on nitrate? And judging by Asdeath's words, there were multiple targets. Blaine ran through the possibilities in his mind and came to a likely conclusion: the victims might be officials from the Conscience faction. The Conscience faction was the foundation for rebuilding after the fall of Honest's regime. If the three beasts wiped out what little remained of them, the Empire would be left in a dire state, with no capable figures to lead its recovery. Although this was just speculation, Blaine knew he couldn't afford to sit back any longer. He had to bring this up with Asdeath before it was too late. Chapter 119, Clarifying Positions. The three beasts were temporarily resting at Asdeath's mansion. Seizing the opportunity, Nia sidled up to Blaine. "Lord Blaine, is it okay if I call you that?" "You can just call me Blaine. No need for the extra title," Blaine replied. "No way. If I show disrespect to Lord Blaine, Lady Asdeath definitely won't let me off easily." Nia shook his head firmly. Blaine had nothing to say to that. "Fine, suit yourself. I don't really understand why Lady Asdeath is so obsessed with you, Lord Blaine, but now that I take a closer look, you are quite handsome. Maybe that's the reason?" Nia had moved in so close that their face was nearly touching Blaine's. Unaware that Nia, despite his feminine appearance and attire, was actually a boy, Blaine instinctively leaned his neck back slightly. "Speaking of which, Lord Blaine, since you're staying at Lady Asdeath's house, does that mean you're already living together?" Nia asked curiously. He was surprised by how quickly things had progressed between them. He remembered that Lady Asdeath had only realized her feelings during the Northern Tribes campaign, and she had just returned to the Imperial capital yesterday. Yet today, they were already living together. It was even possible that last night they had. At that moment, Liver coughed lightly and reminded Nia, "Don't be rude to Lord Blaine." Yes, only then did Nia step back, flashing a playful grin. "Good thing you're not actually a girl. Otherwise, with what you just did, Lady Asdeath would have definitely tortured you for answers," Liver remarked flatly. Blaine immediately sensed something was off. "Wait. Did you just say he's not a girl?" "That's right, Lord Blaine. Nia is actually a boy, though he dresses like a girl," Liver confirmed respectfully. "Don't let his cute looks fool you. He's got some twisted hobbies. He enjoys peeling off the faces of beautiful women and collecting them," Daidara said with a chuckle. "You're not any better. All you ever think about is killing." Nia shot back, rolling his eyes. "That's because those are experience points. I need experience points to level up," Daidara emphasized. Blaine fell silent. He had no interest in engaging with these two lunatics. After resting up, the three beasts prepared to set out for their next mission. "Lord Blaine, we're off for another job. See you later," Nia said cheerfully as he waved goodbye. Blaine nodded. "Seems like Minister Honest is making more moves. You all look pretty busy." "That's right. There are still some officials in court who are thorns in the Prime Minister's side. He wants them to disappear," Liver replied almost without hesitation. Because of Asdeath, he had no reason to be wary of Blaine. After all, Blaine was already living with Lady Asdeath. There was no way he could be a spy. To the three beasts, Blaine held a status above their own, second only to Lady Esdeath. That meant his words carried nearly absolute authority. I see. Blaine was now certain of his suspicions. The officials being eliminated by the three beasts were indeed part of the Conscience faction. But why frame nitrate for it afterward? Could this be connected to General Doe? After all, it was General Doe who had been sheltering those very officials. Minister Tyrannus didn't want to openly break ties with General Doe, so he resorted to underhanded tactics, having the three beasts secretly assassinate the Conscience faction's officials and then pinning the blame on nitrate. That way, General Doe would be forced into an all-out conflict with them. This scenario played out perfectly in Minister Tyrannus's favor. Both General Doe and nitrate were major threats to him, and having them destroy each other was the most advantageous outcome. Blaine had essentially pieced together the entire scheme. Once the three beasts had left, Blaine found himself unable to sit still. Blaine, about this afternoon. Esdeath brought up the matter of hunting danger beasts again. But Blaine, looking unusually serious, interrupted her. Esdeath, there's something I need to make clear to you first. What's with the serious tone? Aren't we lovers? Just say whatever's on your mind. Esdeath smiled. Blaine gave a slight nod and got straight to the point. I've taken control of the Empire's assassination unit and established a new organization. That's good news, isn't it? I'm sure you manage it far better than someone like Xiao. Esdeath replied. No. What I mean is, the organization I created aims to change the Empire from within. Blaine stated bluntly, it's different from the Revolutionary Army, which seeks to overthrow the Empire outright. But from Honest's perspective, both I and my organization are undoubtedly enemies of his regime. Esdeath was momentarily surprised but didn't react strongly. I see. But that's not a big deal. Just disband that organization and have everyone submit to me. Blaine was caught off guard by how indifferent she seemed. Shaking his head, he rejected her proposal. No, my ideals won't change, and I won't dissolve my organization. On the contrary, I hope you'll join me instead. At his words, Esdeath let out a soft chuckle. I'm a general of the Empire, and you're actually saying this to me? Her icy gaze flickered dangerously, as if daring him to push his words any further one step more, and she might just make him pay for it. I know you won't agree so easily. Blaine sighed. If only we weren't on opposing sides, things would be perfect. No rush. I'll make you accept it in time. Asking you to disband your organization so suddenly is indeed a bit much. Esdeath said understandingly. Even though Blaine had made his stance clear, she remained incredibly tolerant of him. The only reason was that he was her lover. I've said what I needed to say. For now, I have to leave, but I'll be back. Blaine's words made Esdeath's eyes tremble slightly. Don't go. She instinctively reached out, trying to grab his hand. A sudden fear crept into her. What if he left and never returned? Given the conversation they had just had, this moment felt eerily like two people parting ways forever due to irreconcilable beliefs. Chapter 120, The ability to freeze time and space. Even after learning that Blaine stood on the opposing side, Esdeath neither wavered nor grew angry. To her, this did nothing to change how she felt about him. As long as Blaine stayed by her side, none of it mattered. She wouldn't allow him to leave. However, double Kamui's spatial transfer was too fast. Before Esdeath could grab him, Blaine had already shifted into the Kamui space. In the next instant, her hand grasped at nothing. Blaine had completely vanished before her eyes. Although he had used this ability in front of others before, this was the first time Esdeath had seen it with her own eyes. Even so, she wasn't particularly concerned. She assumed it was just a form of teleportation. Rare, yes, but not unheard of in this world. Blaine. A hint of sorrow flickered across Esdeath's face. But it didn't last long. Within moments, she regained her composure. She had always been the kind of person who thrived on challenges. If Blaine could teleport, then all she needed to do was develop an ability that could freeze both time and space. That way, he would never be able to escape from her. And she would achieve it. She had no doubt about that. If she lacked that confidence, she wouldn't be Esdeath. Clenching the hand that had just failed to seize him, she immediately began contemplating how to push her blood Tegu to its absolute limits. After transferring into the Kamui space, Blaine relocated himself to the Akatsuki organization's base. Commander Blaine is back. I thought it would be a while before you returned. As expected of Commander Blaine. Even after being pressured by Esdeath, you still managed to escape unscathed. By the way, I heard that yesterday Esdeath publicly declared that she and Commander Blaine are lovers. Is that true? I can't say for sure, but the news has spread all over the Imperial capital. It's hard to doubt it now. As soon as they saw Blaine return, everyone was eager to discuss the situation between him and Esdeath. The one most concerned, without a doubt, was Kuram. The moment she first heard about Blaine and Esdeath moving around together like a couple, Her heart sank. She had already suspected that there was something unusual between them ever since Edith claimed she wanted Blaine as her lieutenant. But this development had happened far too suddenly. Edith had only just returned from the Northern Front, and in the blink of an eye, things had escalated this far. Meanwhile, Blaine naturally heard the murmurs around him, but he had no interest in explaining his relationship with Edith. Instead, he got straight to the point. In the past 2 days, have there been any unusual incidents in or around the Imperial capital? Specifically, cases where officials were assassinated, and night raid flyers were left at the scene? As soon as he asked, someone quickly responded. There have been. I was planning to report it once you returned. And it's not just one case, there have already been 2 confirmed incidents, both leaving behind large numbers of night raid flyers. After investigating, we found that both assassinated officials belong to the Rare Conscience faction within the Empire. Didn't you say that Night Raid, like us, aims to overthrow Honest's regime? That's why we felt Night Raid wouldn't do something like this. We suspect there's someone else behind it. The young man reporting the situation laid out both the intelligence and his own deductions in one breath. You're right. It is someone else, Honest's faction. Blaine immediately stated, from now on, I need you to secretly protect the remaining officials of the Conscience faction. However, your top priority is your own safety. Operate in teams of at least 5, and only those with Tegu or Xing should be involved in combat. The enemy is Edith's 3 beasts, each one a Tegu user. Your primary goal is survival. Protect the officials only if it doesn't put you at unnecessary risk. Whether the mission succeeds or not doesn't matter. What matters is that you all come back alive. Remember that. Blaine heavily emphasized the word safe. What worried him most was that his subordinates, having spent so long in the Empire's assassination unit, might become fixated on completing the mission at all costs. To him, their lives were far more important than any mission. We understand. Everyone nodded seriously. Their tension eased significantly. This was nothing like their time in the Imperial assassination unit, where orders demanded they complete their mission no matter the cost. By the way, have you been monitoring former Prime Minister Tree's activities over the past 2 days? Blaine suddenly asked. When he had obtained the list of Conscience faction members from Night Raid, Tree immediately caught his attention. He had ordered his people to investigate the former Prime Minister. During Tree's tenure, the Empire had still been prosperous. If Honest was removed from power, Blaine saw Tree as the best candidate to take his place. That was precisely why Blaine suspected Honest might try to eliminate him first, removing such a significant potential threat. Yes, the former Prime Minister has been living in seclusion outside the Imperial capital, but recently, he seems to be preparing for something. He might be planning to return to the capital. One of the investigators reported. If he plans to return, then he's definitely in danger. Blaine's voice grew heavy. He strongly suspected that Tree was about to become the 3 beasts' next target. I'll head over to him now. You all divide into groups. Some will monitor the 3 beasts, but do not alert them. If your presence is exposed, retreat immediately. The rest of you, particularly the fighters, will secretly guard the officials most likely to be targeted. Blaine quickly outlined the plan. At that moment, Kurom suddenly spoke up. Commander, I want to go with you. I can handle this alone. They need you more. Our manpower is already stretched thin. Blaine refused without hesitation. Hearing his rejection, Kurom became visibly displeased. In a low, resentful voice, she muttered, if we're short on people, why not ask Night Raid for help? It was rare for Blaine to turn down her requests. Given how much she was already dwelling on Edith, this only added fuel to her frustration. But in reality, Blaine's decision had nothing to do with her personal feelings. He was purely considering the safety of the organization. If Kurom wasn't there, his subordinates would face a much greater risk against the 3 beasts. Unfamiliar with the original story, Blaine had no way of knowing their exact strength. But the fact that they were all Tegu users was reason enough for extreme caution. Meanwhile, Kurom felt increasingly anxious. She was terrified that if she let him go, Edith would steal him away forever. Chapter 121, Mind's Misunderstanding. It might be worth seeking help from Night Raid. They likely don't know that the 3 beasts are impersonating them and slaughtering officials from the Conscience faction. Blaine nodded thoughtfully. I'll head to Night Raid and be back soon. With that, he used Kamui's dimension to teleport himself outside Night Raid's base. Night Raid quickly sensed an intruder, only to discover it was Blaine. Wasting no time, he immediately explained his purpose, informing them of Minister Honest's scheme. This is really happening? The 3 beasts are impersonating us to attack Conscience faction officials. Najanda's expression turned serious as she grasped the gravity of the situation. That's right. I don't know what your past relationship with General Do was like, but if you don't stop the 3 beasts now, his attitude toward you will sink to rock bottom. Najanda nodded. Our relationship with General Do has never been great. To someone as rigid as him, the Revolutionary Army is something he'd never tolerate. But at the very least, he hasn't actively sought to target us. She paused for a moment before continuing. If we let Minas Tirith succeed, we'll end up in direct conflict with General Do. Having as Death, the Empire's so-called strongest, is already a handful. If we also have to deal with someone of Do's caliber. After pondering for a while, she said, you want to protect the Conscience faction officials, right? We don't want them to be persecuted either, so we'll definitely help. While the Revolutionary Army's ultimate goal was to overthrow the Empire, they had no intention of targeting Conscience faction officials. In fact, they would need them when it came time to rebuild a new nation. 2 or 3 people should be enough, Blaine suggested. Najunda glanced at the others. If it's just 2 or 3, let's see if there are any volunteers. Hearing this, Mine hesitated. She wanted to help Blaine, but if she volunteered too quickly, would it seem too obvious? Me. Before Mine could decide, Chelsea eagerly raised her hand. Akame followed shortly after. I'll go too. She likely volunteered because of Kurum. At that moment, Mine realized she needed to act fast. If she didn't make a decision now, she might regret it later. Blaine only needed 3 people if others stepped up first, forcing her way in afterward would seem even more deliberate. I'll go too. I want to help. She spoke without hesitation this time. All right, you 3 then. Najunda nodded. Blaine had no objections either. Truthfully, the best candidate to deal with the 3 beasts was Bullet. In the original story, he had single-handedly fought all 3, instantly killing one before taking down another, only to succumb to poison in the end. His sheer strength allowed him to fight on par with his teeth even without his Digu. But fate had cut his story short, what some might call a plot-induced death. This time, however, the task fell to Chelsea, Akame, and Mine instead. Thanks. Blaine thanked Chelsea, Akame, and Mine. No need to be so formal, Chelsea said with a smile. You're welcome. Akame replied with a slight smile. After all, she was mainly here for Kurum. It's nothing, Mine muttered, surprisingly without her usual sincere attitude. By the way, you didn't bring Kurum with you this time? Akame suddenly asked Blaine. It all happened so suddenly, so I came alone first, Blaine explained. But if you want to see Kurum, you can meet her at my place later. Actually, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about. Kurum's condition. Akame's expression turned serious. You know as well as I do that her body has been severely damaged by those drugs. I heard of a place where a secret spring is said to have restorative properties. If possible, I hope you can take her there to recover. Of course, no problem. Blaine had no reason to refuse. He wanted Kurum and the others to regain their health and extend their lifespans, otherwise, he wouldn't have taken such care in regulating their drug intake. Whether or not this mysterious hot spring truly had miraculous effects, it was worth a try. Alright, let's head out. Time isn't on our side. With that, Blaine led Akame and the others away from the nitrate base. However, after walking only a short distance, he suddenly stopped. Seeing his unexpected pause, the 3 girls looked at him in confusion. Close your eyes, Blaine said. Why? Mine asked suspiciously. You'll find out soon enough. Blaine had no intention of explaining. He planned to use spatial teleportation to bring them to his base, and since it would happen in an instant, there was no need for unnecessary questions. If he told them it was a form of instant travel, there was always the chance that curiosity might lead them to peek. Unlike Mine, Chelsea and Akame didn't question him and simply followed instructions, closing their eyes without hesitation. Watching Blaine act so mysteriously, Mine's mind began to wander. He suddenly wants us to close our eyes and refuses to say why. Could he be planning something? As the thought crossed her mind, her face flushed slightly. Wait, is this guy seriously about to do that right now? Even though her rational side resisted the idea, her body instinctively complied. She shut her eyes as instructed and even unconsciously adjusted her posture, lifting her chin slightly and rising onto the tips of her toes. In the next instant, Blaine activated his teleportation. In the blink of an eye, they moved from the nitrate base to Kamui's dimension and then directly to his base inside the Ecchi cavern. Mine, still unaware of what had happened, remained frozen in her previous stance. You can open your eyes now, Blaine finally said. Chelsea was the first to open hers, and the moment she saw Mine's rather suggestive posture, a mischievous grin spread across her face. Given that she had long since noticed Mine's feelings for Blaine, she instantly put 2 and 2 together. Leaning close to Mine's ear, Chelsea whispered teasingly, "Oh my, Mine, you're such a naughty girl." Chapter 122, Akame, greatly shocked hearing Chelsea's voice in her ear, especially the word naughty, made Mine snap her eyes open. Realizing what Chelsea was implying, Her face immediately turned scarlet. You. Mine was so flustered she couldn't even form a proper sentence. Me? What about me? Chelsea grinned mischievously. But she knew when to hold back. She didn't say it out loud, nor did she expose Mine's real thoughts in front of the others, especially Blaine. She had long since considered Mine a companion, so she would never go that far. It was just that, with her naturally teasing personality, she couldn't resist messing with someone as easily flustered as Mine. Since Chelsea had whispered so quietly, no one else had heard their exchange. Blaine assumed she was just teasing Mine as usual. Since there were more pressing matters at hand, he didn't think much of it. Sister. Kurum had been lost in thought, still troubled by the situation with Asdeath, when she suddenly noticed Akame standing before her. Akame was equally surprised. In just the blink of an eye, Blaine had transported them here. She wasn't sure exactly how far they were from the nitrate base, but judging by the unfamiliar surroundings, it was definitely not anywhere nearby. Hearing Kurum's voice, she quickly refocused. She walked toward her sister. Kurum, we've come to help you. At the same time, she caught sight of her former comrades from the Empire's assassination unit. After all, the members of Akatsuki were the very same people she had once fought alongside. Akame. I never thought we'd meet again without being on opposing sides. It feels like it's been ages. And Akame's gotten even prettier. It actually hasn't been that long, but she has changed a lot. This is really something. Akame is standing before us again, and we don't have to fight her this time. Kelly and the others were overcome with emotion. Akame stepped closer to Kurum, then looked at her former comrades. Everyone. It's been a long time. It really has, Akame. We've missed you and always hoped you'd return someday. But seeing that you're doing well with Night Raid puts our minds at ease. You said you're here to help us, right? We actually get to fight alongside you again? It's like a dream. Kelly and the others spoke with smiles, the atmosphere light and amicable, as if past conflicts had never existed. Blaine then explained the battle plan to Akame, Chelsea, and Mine, going over the same details he had already shared with the others. His strategy remained largely unchanged. He would act alone or, at most, partner with one or two others. In that case, I'll team up with Blaine. Chelsea said immediately, claiming the spot before anyone else could. Kurum opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, Akame turned to her and said, Kurum, we'll be in charge of secretly protecting the officials. Sister, I. Kurum hesitated. On one side was her sister, and on the other was Commander Blaine. After a moment of thought, she made her decision. The whole situation with Asdeath had already left her anxious, and now another girl was volunteering to partner with the commander? There was no way she could just sit back and do nothing. Having made up her mind, Kurum turned to Akame. I'd love to go on a mission with you again, but there's something I have to do. I'm sorry, sister. What? Akame looked utterly devastated, as if the sky had just fallen. Mine had never seen her react so strongly before. Kurum's refusal must have shaken her more than she expected. Meanwhile, Mine was still fixated on what had just happened. She had embarrassed herself for no reason, and the sheer humiliation was unbearable. And worst of all, Chelsea, of all people, had noticed. Forget working with Blaine, she could barely even speak to him now without wanting to crawl into a hole. What a surprise, Kurum actually refused her favorite sister. Well, this concerns Commander Blaine, and it looks like a new enemy has appeared. That beautiful girl came with Akame from Night Raid, right? Haha, poor Akame must be a little hurt, but there's nothing she can do about it. I'm guessing what happened with Asdeath has already shaken Kurum quite a bit. The rest of the Akatsuki organization murmured among themselves. At that moment, Kurum walked up to Blaine. Commander, I want to be your partner too. Alright. Blaine had initially planned to act alone, but in an instant, he had a 3-person team. Still, with Night Raid joining them, they weren't short on manpower anymore, so he didn't dwell on it. Just then, Mine turned to Sir beside her. So, let's do our best too. Yeah. Sir nodded enthusiastically, her fighting spirit burning bright. As I expected, you're all good people. Sir said with a smile. Since Mine and the others had come to support them, Sir once again labeled them as good people. Well, I guess that's not a bad thing. Mine mumbled, feeling a little embarrassed by the praise. Then let's give it our all. For our fallen comrades we must change the Empire's dark reality. Kelly's words lifted the team's morale even further. Just as the atmosphere was heating up, Chelsea suddenly spoke. I know it's tragic that your former comrades died, but honestly, as assassins, they were failures. You should accept that harsh reality. The moment she said this, Kelly and the others fell silent. Her words were blunt, almost cruel, but since she was someone Commander Blaine had brought from Night Raid, they didn't know how to voice their dissatisfaction. What did you just say? Kurom was the only one who immediately questioned Chelsea, her voice sharp. Blaine, however, was taken aback. It was rare to see such a serious expression on Chelsea's face. Looking closely, he could even detect a faint trace of sorrow in her eyes. Not wanting tensions to escalate, he quickly stepped in. "All right, that's enough. We're about to start the mission. This isn't the time for arguments. Get ready. We move out soon." After addressing Kurom and the others, Blaine turned to Chelsea. "You come with me for a moment." Chelsea followed him to a quiet corner. "You probably think I'm a pretty awful person by now," she said with a sigh, speaking first. She hadn't wanted to come across as annoying in front of Blaine, but she just couldn't hold back. Oh well, whatever. It wasn't like she could change who she was. Chapter 123, Former Minister Tree and Spear. "No, I don't think so," Blaine said. "Oh?" Chelsea was visibly surprised. "Then what do you think?" "I think you act this way because you care about them. But the way you express it is a bit. Do you really not mind being hated?" Blaine shared his thoughts. Chelsea froze for a moment. "So that's how you see it." Her reaction gave her away. Blaine had hit the mark. She did believe that they were too attached to their fallen comrades. From an assassin's perspective, that was far from a good thing. With a soft sigh, Chelsea admitted, "Yeah, I want them to let go of those naive thoughts so they don't end up like Horberg." "Do you want me to explain it to them?" Blaine asked. "No need. If they hate me, so be it. That way, if I die one day, they won't be sad about it." Chelsea smiled. But that smile carried a trace of sorrow. "Don't say such foolish things. You all need to stay alive," Blaine said firmly. Chelsea gave a small smile. That's easier said than done. For an assassin, simply staying alive was a luxury. She had long accepted the reality that, one day, she might fail a mission and be killed by an enemy. "But I'm still happy you said that to me." Chelsea's smile brightened. "If I could, of course, I'd want to keep living. After all, there are still things I haven't told you yet." "Ah." Realizing what she had just blurted out, Chelsea snapped back to reality. It had slipped out unconsciously. But it was too late to take it back now. Besides, that thick-headed guy probably didn't catch on anyway. "Chelsea, you." Even though her words were vague, Blaine still sensed something. His time with Steve had made him a little more perceptive about these things, though only slightly. But before he could dwell on it, a quiet voice suddenly spoke from behind them. "What are you two doing here?" It was Kurom. Somehow, she had appeared behind them without a sound. In truth, Kurom had followed them from the very beginning, secretly listening to their conversation. She had been curious about what Blaine and Chelsea were up to in private. And when their conversation took a turn, the atmosphere growing more and more off, she couldn't hold back any longer. "It's nothing. I was just talking to her about that unpleasant matter from earlier," Blaine explained calmly. Chelsea felt a pang of disappointment. The mood had been just right until Kurom interrupted. Then, the group set off. Blaine, Kurom, and Chelsea traveled together, riding a flying danger beast to the secluded residence of former Prime Minister Tree. Since Blaine had never been there before, he couldn't teleport directly using Kamui space. Curious about his ability, Chelsea asked, "Aren't you able to teleport? Why aren't you using it this time?" "There's a cool-down period. I can't use it repeatedly in a short time," Blaine casually explained, brushing off the question. It was a reasonable excuse after all, plenty of Tegus had usage restrictions. "I see, that makes sense." Chelsea accepted the explanation without doubt. After some time, they arrived at Tree's secluded residence, located in a small village nestled in the mountains outside the imperial capital. The village had only about a dozen or so households. Though Tree's home wasn't exactly run down, it was nowhere near the level of a noble's residence in the capital. This alone made it clear that Tree was nothing like the current prime minister, honest. That said, he was still a former prime minister, so he wasn't exactly poor. His residence was well guarded, with security in place. After securing their danger beast mounts nearby, Blaine and the others approached the entrance of the estate. "You're adventurers from the village, right? We happen to be short on 3 guards for the escort." "You'll do." The gate guard didn't stop them. Instead, he invited them inside. From his words, it sounded like they were recruiting people to escort Tree's convoy. Blaine simply nodded without saying a word. Kurom and Chelsea followed behind him in silence. Just like that, they smoothly blended into the escort team without any issues. Listening to the idle chatter of the other guards, Blaine learned that while Tree was once a prime minister, he had long since lost all power. Even the guards in this convoy had been hastily gathered from the village. Though he had no authority left, he still had enough wealth to hire a group of escorts. The true powerhouse in the convoy, however, was Tree's daughter, Spear, a skilled martial artist from the Imperial Fist Temple. In the Empire, she was considered quite formidable. Blaine's lingering doubts were answered if they were struggling just to put together a group of escorts. It was no wonder he and his team had infiltrated so easily. At that moment, Trey appeared. He was an elderly, bald man leaning on a cane. His graying beard and eyebrows made his advanced age apparent. Dressed in a simple wool coat, he looked like any ordinary old man, far from the image of a former prime minister. Beside him stood a young girl with a delicate face, a slender figure, and long golden hair. She carried a spear with a noticeably larger and heavier spearhead than usual. For someone so young to have trained at the Imperial Fist Temple, she was undoubtedly a prodigy. "Everyone's here? Then let's move out. There could be bandits, raiders, or danger beasts along the way. I'll be counting on all of you." Tree addressed the armed guards around him. Hiring them was a precaution against the many dangers lurking between here and the Imperial capital. The journey would be anything but safe. Amidst the heavily armored escorts, the more casually dressed Blaine, Kiram, and Chelsea stood out. "Father, are those three part of the escort team as well?" Spear immediately noticed them. Bulky armor might be cumbersome, but it provided necessary protection for ordinary people. Those who carried only weapons without any armor were usually either extremely weak or exceptionally strong, which made Spear pay extra attention to them. Chapter 124, Encounter with the Three Beasts. "I guess so. Young people nowadays probably don't like that kind of heavy armor," Tree said. "Alright." Spear also felt that a small village like this was unlikely to have any powerful fighters, at least, she had never seen one before. With that thought, she stopped paying attention to the three men. Tree and Spear got into the carriage, and the caravan set off. For most of the journey, Blaine and the others had been laying low. They couldn't afford to reveal their strength too easily, especially when facing average bandits or danger beasts. At most, they provided a little assistance without showing their true power. The bandits and danger beasts they encountered along the way were dealt with effortlessly. There sure have been a lot of bandits on this trip. We're already close to the Imperial capital, yet the security situation is getting worse. Tree sighed after yet another bandit attack. Fortunately, he had his daughter traveling with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to fend off so many ruthless criminals. "Father, for the sake of the Empire's people, you're returning to the dark and corrupt Imperial capital. I truly believe you're a great man," Spear said. "I can't just hide anymore and watch a 1,000-year-old empire be destroyed at the hands of that man. Now that I've decided to step back into the world, I must stop that wicked Prime Minister," Tree said firmly. After the former Emperor and Empress passed away, Tree was stripped of his position as Prime Minister by none other than the current Prime Minister, Honest. He had long suspected Honest of orchestrating the previous Emperor's death, but he had no solid proof. Moreover, Honest had tried to eliminate him multiple times. To survive, Tree had retreated into the mountains, far from the Imperial capital. Yet every time he heard news of the capital's worsening state, his anger grew. This time, he could no longer stand by. "I'll make sure to protect you, Father," Spear said. "You've really grown up, Spear." Tree sighed. "But I worry you'll be too strong to find a husband." Hearing that, Spear's face turned bright red. "Why are you bringing that up all of a sudden?" Just then, the carriage came to an abrupt stop, jolting both Tree and Spear. "What's going on? More bandits?" Tree asked, his expression turning serious. Spear immediately lifted the curtain and saw three figures standing ahead. Their hostile intent was clear. Without hesitation, she stepped out of the carriage, ready to fight. The guards also tightened their grips on their weapons. Only Blaine recognized them, the three beasts under his teeth. Meanwhile, the three beasts didn't even take Tree's group seriously. Not a single Tegu user among them. It was like offering up lambs for slaughter. Because of that, they hadn't even noticed Blaine in the back at first. "Daidara, take care of them," Liver ordered. Daidara grinned. Just as he was about to start the massacre, someone unexpected stepped forward. Blaine walked out from the crowd and stood at the front. Seeing the crimson-eyed young man suddenly place himself in harm's way, Spear quickly warned him, "Those three give me a strange feeling. You should stay behind me." Blaine, unfazed, replied, "It's fine. Leave them to me." Spear was momentarily stunned by his confidence. For the first time, she experienced the feeling of being protected by a man. "Lord Blaine? Why are you here?" Daidara asked in shock. Liver and Naya were equally stunned. They never would have expected Lord Blaine to be traveling with the convoy of the former Prime Minister, Tree. "Lord Blaine?" Hearing the title, Spear couldn't help but turn to Blaine. "Do you know them? Does that mean they aren't actually our enemies?" Blaine didn't have time to respond to Spear. Instead, he addressed the three beasts in front of him. "Go back. These people cannot die yet. That won't do. This is an order from that person." Daidara refused without hesitation. The person he referred to was of course, Lady Esdeath. Now that Blaine had somehow aligned himself with Tree, even someone like Daidara, who usually thought of nothing but gaining experience, was forced to be more cautious. Although we hold Lord Blaine in great respect, this is a mission we must carry out. Liver added firmly. To them, Lord Blaine's status was second only to Lady Esdeath. However, that also meant her orders were absolute. No matter who stood before them, even Blaine, they would never defy Lady Esdeath's command. We mean no offense, but we hope Lord Blaine will not stop us. As soon as Niall finished speaking, Daidara charged forward, aiming to eliminate Tree and his people while deliberately avoiding Blaine. His speed was so fast that neither Spear, Tree, nor the guards could react in time. However, he never managed to bypass Blaine. Without warning, a white mask appeared on Blaine's face, and in his hand materialized a gun by Akaiwa. With a swift motion, Blaine used a gunbai to block Daidara's path. Under the gaze of his Mangekyo Sharingan, Daidara's speed gave him no advantage at all. The immense force of Daidara's charge was instantly absorbed by the gunbai, transformed into energy, and rebounded back at him. Though the attack didn't cause serious harm, it was enough to send Daidara flying. So fast. It was only then that Spear processed what had just happened. A wave of fear washed over her. If Blaine hadn't protected them, they would have been completely caught off guard, including herself. The enemy was far stronger than she had anticipated. She knew she stood no chance against them. And yet, even warriors of this level still treated Blaine with deep respect. Just who was this mysterious young man? As Spear watched Blaine's back, her eyes shimmered with intrigue. Daidara, having been sent flying over 10 meters, finally struggled to his feet, looking disheveled. Liver and Nia's expressions turned grim. Lord Blaine was resolute in stopping them. This is your final warning. Next time, I won't hold back. Blaine's voice was cold and unwavering. At this, Liver and Nia hesitated. Had it been anyone else, they would have carried out Lady Esdeath's orders without question. But the one standing in their way was Lord Blaine, Lady Esdeath's lover. And that made things far more complicated. Chapter 125, won't share with you. If Lord Blaine could make Lady Esdeath so infatuated, then his strength was undoubtedly formidable. Given Lady Esdeath's personality, she would never be interested in someone weak. They had just witnessed with their own eyes how easily Lord Blaine had overpowered Daidara. Win or lose, their fate seemed grim either way. If they lost, death was certain. But even if they won, they would likely face Lady Esdeath's wrath. After much deliberation, they decided to abandon their mission for now. Lord Blaine has really put us in a difficult position. Liver said helplessly. But there's nothing we can do. Daidara, Nia, let's retreat. He planned to report the situation to Lady Esdeath first and then decide their next move. Daidara showed no signs of resistance and obediently followed Liver. However, before leaving, Nia approached Spear. Seeing that Nia didn't appear hostile, Blaine didn't stop her. It's such a shame to ruin such a pretty face. If Lord Blaine weren't here, I'd definitely skin you alive and keep your face as a souvenir. Nia said with a sweet, innocent smile, yet her words were utterly chilling. Spear's face immediately went pale. Blaine wasn't surprised. That was exactly the kind of thing Nia would do. In fact, in the original story, Nia had done just that. After Daidara instantly killed Tree and all the guards, the gravely injured Spear had her face peeled off alive by Nia. She had died from shock before the process was even complete. Blaine spoke indifferently, you should really drop that disturbing habit. Oh, come on, Lord Blaine, don't be so strict. Nia pouted playfully before skipping off to rejoin Liver and Daidara. With that, the crisis was successfully diffused. The guards all let out a sigh of relief. If that young man hadn't stopped the three enemies, they would have suffered a gruesome fate. They couldn't even follow their movements.